Wow. Hey, pura vida. ¿Qué me dicen? Like, what are you guys saying? What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in once again. Appreciate you guys making the time to be here. We're going to go ahead and continue uh, basically investigating the history of the use and origin of mulatto. And we had a pretty good explanation of its original meaning, all the way back in Middle Ages and before the Europeans arrived, up to the time when Europeans arrived in the Americas. And we saw how it was so different than what they tell us it means today. And you see the whole history and who is related to it. Please watch that video if you didn't. This was yesterday's video, the origin of mulatto, the lost history of the word, the origin. Today we're going to continue. We're going to have a lot of good drop today. Actually, I've read parts of this chapter that we're going to review today from the book by Jack D. Forbes. Again, I'm going to show you the book again if you didn't watch yesterday's. It's going to be a lot of good drop. I hope you guys enjoy it. It's going to deal with the word mulatto now in colonial America or in the Americas, right? Especially North America and the United States. And a lot of this is going to be things we've shown cases of and shown a lot of history and a lot of primary sources, a lot of genealogy, a lot of examples we have shown in the last 9 years of what we're going to read today. All right, so it's just more corroboration, more icing for the cake. We're doing a little review again too, but we're going to read the whole chapter again under fair use for educational purposes. All right, I hope you guys enjoy it. So again, we're coming back to the book Africans and Native Americans, the language of race and the evolution of the red-black peoples. All right, we touched the hijack a little bit with the whole African, narrative, But shout out to the author, Jack D. Forbes. Today we're going to read mostly chapter 7, but I do want to read this little part here from chapter 6. I'm not trying to skip anything. There is a lot of good info in chapter 6, actually. It just keeps repeating a lot of the things, though. And I want to get to the drop, which is in chapter 7. But I want to show this from chapter 6 real quick, and I want to go back to the cover and point something out. So in this part of the chapter 6, they're talking about another way mulattoes being used. Is literally telling you that mulatto was being used on the offspring of Indians and whatever other so-called black person. A person being labeled Negro or black or even African, right? We got to dodge the hijack. They're just talking about somebody coming that's not from there, from that region, from another place, that is a Negro. Okay, so we don't know if he's African, he could be Indian, he could be a black European, right? So all that has to be proven. But the part where they're saying a Negro is mixing, we're talking about a person of color who's not from that region mixing with an Indian of that region. And that Indian doesn't mean he's white either. That's obviously these are people of color. We're talking about the 1500s, right? So we got two people of color mixing and their offspring is a mulatto. You get what I'm saying? So there's no white involved. For example, let me read this. It says in the 1580s, Miguel Cabello Balboa wrote a detailed account of the Esmeraldas region of present-day Ecuador. So this region of Esmeraldas is known for a lot of so-called black Ecuadorians or Afro-Ecuadorians, they call them. And they try to make all these people Africans. They say that shipwrecked from Africa, slaves raided the ship and they crashed and they settled here. That's a whole hijack story we're going to break down one day. I'm already digging into it. I've been digging into it. Again, it's all conjecture based on modern interpretations of the words Negroes or slaves. All right, so they're saying that in this day, right, in the 1580s, a detailed account of the Esmeraldas region of present-day Ecuador, including especially coverage of the intermixture of, it says, people of color, foreign Negroes, basically, with the Americans of the area, who, again, could be also Negroes or people of color, right? So that's what I'm trying to tell you, see? So there's a report of all this is happening. Some foreign so-called Negro coming into this region of Ecuador and mixing with the indigenous people. whether that other Negro is, another American Indian, a black European, right? Those two are the most likely. They're calling them an African just based on modern hijacks of how they call you an African, right? So they have to prove that African part. Who are you talking about specifically, right? Give me a name. Either way, all right, just got to have context. Of greatest interest here is his consistent use of the term mulatto for American, the time about for Indians and other Negroes, mixing, right? As in the case of the children of Nicaraguan mother and a foreign so-called Negro father who had run away from a Spanish ship. So he came on a Spanish ship, right? So again, that could be an American Indian, that could be an undesirable black European, right? That's mixing with this local Nicaraguan person, mother, who most likely is of color, especially again back in the 1500s, right? So they got the Spanish source there. It says, thus the Nicaraguan American woman, that's about the local Indian woman, gave birth to two mulattoes, sons of a Negro. You see, they're calling the other dude a Negro. But what is his real nationality? That doesn't mean African. You get what I'm trying to tell you guys? You got to break out of that. So you see, either way, they're telling you straight up that in this case, in this use, the word mulatto has nothing to do with white people mixing with Africans or black people. These could be two people of color. We know there's a Negro father, right? So who's the white, right? It's not the Indian. The Indians ain't white, right? The Nicaraguan American woman ain't, and the people in Esmeralda in the region, these people were colored folk. These were people of color, so-called Negroes too, that were already here since ancient times. All right, so that's a great example. They're telling you they labeled her, they are from mulattoes, and it had nothing to do with white folks. It's just the mixing of two different nations right there. We're going to get into that. It says, in the region also was a Negro named Alonso de Illescas. So in Nicaragua, listen, in the region, right? Because they were talking about Nicaragua. There was a Negro named Alonso de Illescas. A Negro, right? So what is his? He said he was born in Cape Verde. Born in Cape Verde, huh? Remember, they were bringing Indians, American Indians, and Sephardic Jews, prisoners, and people fleeing the Inquisition to Cape Verde. Since the 1490s, they were bringing American Indians there as slaves. So he could be an American Indian, he could be Portuguese, Sephardic Jew descendant, he could be a mixture of both. This so-called Negro who was born in Cape Verde. But he was sent as a young man to Seville, right? He was sent to Spain and later to South America. Why are they sending this dude all over the place, huh? Alonso married una India hermosa, all right? Shout out to all the Cape Verdean people. Again, they have a lot of Indian blood themselves. So it says that he married a beautiful Indian woman. So maybe he just married other Indians, or maybe he knew about his people before they ended up in Cape Verde. They were coming from the same region. Hey, you never know. But he married an Indian woman, right? This Cape Verdean guy. This is in the 1500s, right? The daughter of a principal chief. And one of his children is specifically referred to as una mulata hija suya. That is, as his mulatto daughter. So you see, he's so-called black, right? They call him a Negro. He's supposed to be African because he was born in Cape Verde, but we know better. We know Cape Verde, especially at the time, had many American Indian slaves. They were breeding them. And the Portuguese Jews were fleeing there. And the Moors were fleeing there from Spain and Portugal as well. A lot of your Portuguese Sephardic Jew merchants, a lot of your Portuguese merchants, these are the same people mixing with the Indians in Cape Verde, right? Creating a whole nation there of Cape Verdeans, so-called, right? But it's interesting because now he's saying this black man mixed with an Indian and their daughter is mulatto. So who's the white person? Again, another case. They're using mulatto for the offspring of people of color, two people of color. I just want to point this out to you guys here, right? You see that? It has nothing to do with a white person mixing with a so-called black person. It says these mixed Negro, foreign Negro, right, and American Indian people subsequently created a great deal of difficulty for the Spaniards, right? They created a great deal of difficulty, and now they're going to be rebels. Now, I want to show you the cover again real quick. right? We're gonna go to this image right here. You guys see this image right here of this painting? Now I'm gonna talk about this. We're gonna have a future video on this. I've been planning it, but I want to do it right because I want to leave no room for doubt. Okay. Now, this is important to learn about how they're using mulatto and specifically these characters right here. These were real people, right? These were real people. This is a real painting. This is specifically exactly what Jack Forbes is talking about right now. The offspring of foreign Negroes and local Negroes, right? Or the local Indians, right? So what happened? These people right here, believe it or not, these are royal. These people became part of the Inca royalty. These are some of the offspring of the Inca royalty and the Spanish. Yes. So this is a famous painting in Esmeraldas region, guys. And these people right here, you're going to see were referred to as mulattoes. Look at them. Does these look like so-called mulattoes to you? How they want us to think mulattoes are supposed to look? To me, in my opinion, this is what most people would consider Negroes, right? Again, Negroes is not ethnicity. I'm just saying perspective, right? They wouldn't fit the modern mulatto appearance. But these people right here, they're being called mulattoes. Why? Because they're offsprings of the Black Spanish and the local Indians, the Inca and all that, who are also colored folks. You see what they look like colored folks. You couldn't tell. You can't tell where they getting the so-called black from. If they are Spanish and Incas, right? The way they show us Incas today. When you Google Inca, what do you see? And when you Google Spanish, what do you see today? Would those mixtures of the modern people have children like this, like these three right here? You guys see what I'm showing you, right? That's what I'm trying to break this down, break the spell. You got to have real perspective. I'm trying to tell you for real. If you look these people up, they'll tell you they're the offspring, right, of the so-called Spaniards and Incas, and then they're trying to add some African in there just because of their color. But there's no African. These are straight descendants, offsprings of Spaniards and American local Indians right there in that region. Okay, so we're going to read about them real quick. All right, so in this last paragraph right here, still in chapter 6 here, guys, where I just left off, it says in 1599, several mixed Negroid, foreign Negroid peoples, right? They call them African, right? And American leaders, they're talking about the Incas, of the Esmeraldas region had their portraits painted together by the Native American artist Adrian Sanchez Galke. That's the painting we just saw. This is who they're talking about. You saw what they look like, right? So they're calling them mixed African American leaders. You see? But you see how they're dressed, right? They're dressed like Europeans as well, right? But they're Indians. They're part of the Inca royals, but they had been mixed. They have some Spanish in them, guys. Their portraits have been painted together, right, by this guy Adrian Sanchez Galke. This painting has often been reproduced with the leaders referred to as symbols, but John Letty Fellon tells us that they are incorrectly labeled mulattoes on the painting itself. So the person who actually drew them, right, the primary source, the actual person, the painter, labeled these people mulattoes. Mulattoes. Clearly, this was no mistake, however. That's not a mistake because they were in that usage of that time, that word in that region, they were using it with anybody from two different nations mixing and having an offspring. Right? It wasn't about color. This was no mistake. Okay? This was no mistake. Just wanted to go ahead and break that down for you before we begin reading chapter 7. Again, that is the famous painting you see right here of these fellows, mulattoes, huh? So-called mulattoes, right? It said African and American leaders. So we know American leaders were so-called black like this. So Where, what is the other mixture they call an African? This is what I'm trying to tell you. We got to dig on, and I'm going to show you. It's going to show you the other mixture that you can find on these people is just Spanish. It's just Spanish. The Spanish were black at that time, guys. Like Europeans, mixing with so-called black Indians, and this is their offspring, and they're being called mulattoes. All right. Right. So now we go on to chapter 7. This is where we came to go ahead and review today. We're going to learn a lot. It's a lot of good drop here. Again, I've gone over excerpts of this chapter. I've never read or reviewed the whole chapter with you guys, and we're going to definitely do that. All right, so I hope you enjoy it. I hope you guys are not too much in a rush. We're going to read a lot. So this is, again, chapter 7. The classification of Native Americans as mulattoes in Anglo-North America. Yeah. The classification of American Indians, right? Reclassified as mulattoes, right? North America. Yeah. Reclassified as mulattoes. It's not just about a mix all the time. But you guys saw how we've been breaking it down. You saw earlier what we read in the video from the other day on mulatto, the origin before it reached the Americas. Now it says here, contemporary scholarly and popular literature in the United States has largely ignored the significance of widespread Native American ancestry, American Indian, among so-called, they say Afro-Americans, among black folks, so-called black folks, and also of supposed African, they say Negro. What they mean African in this chapter, guys, this is why I didn't read too much of chapter 6, because it goes into the whole African hijack. And then when I actually went to verify the sources, it didn't say African, it said Negroes, it said slaves. And I had a long conversation with ChatGPT about it, and it agreed, But either way, they're saying that in the American Indians, there's a lot of Negro ancestry, so-called Negro, so-called black, right? Among many Native groups. The consequences of this neglect are far-reaching, and this is especially true in relation to studies of the evolution of music, folktales, social organization, and other aspects of culture. In a similar manner, the existence of a large group of so-called red, so-called black people, crayon colors, man, part American. They're saying, listen, this is what we gotta. It's hard reading this, guys, but we gotta just get through this first part, okay? They're saying part American, part African. That's a hijack, okay? I'm sorry, I gotta that's a big hijack. Who are they talking about specifically? Show me their genealogy. What Africans? Exactly, what Africans? So they're saying Indians and Negroes and colored folks, but it's all the same people, right? Basically, the existence of black Indians, so-called black, right, has been largely overlooked. And in fact, such people have been usually classified as black, like I just said, black Indians, right, by both scholars and North American statutes. Still further, the former existence of comparatively large numbers of Native American slaves. We're going to start saying American Indians. American Indian slaves. We saw the whole slave trade. We saw who the real slaves were. Has also been ignored. The American Indian slave trade has been ignored. A lot of these have been reclassified, called Negroes and all that, called black, eventually called African Americans and Africans, like they're saying in this book in Modern Researchers, Modern Interpretations, by Jack Forbes. It's all good, we know better now, right? 2026. This is from the 90s. This is from the 80s, actually, I think, this book. So a lot of these have been classified as black, right? So the slave trade of American Indians, of people who are Indians and classified as black, right? That has been ignored, generally with great consequence for both early American Indians, all right? They're trying to say both Afro-American. That's not, that's the hijack. I'm not going to repeat the hijack. So there are, of course, exceptions to this pattern of overlooking, the so-called black Indians, right? Connection. Connection. The ancestry, right? First, there are a large number of biographies and autobiographies, as for example, of musicians or singers such as Adelaide Hall, Willie the Lion Smith, Paul Robinson, Josephine Baker, Bunk Johnson, Lena Horne, Pops Foster, George Lewis, Pearl Bailey, Lead Belly, Tina Turner, and others, all of which have specified reference to American Indian ancestry. Okay, yeah, we know a lot of these, but it's way more. It's all so-called black folks. It's not just a couple, it's all. It's all mixed with black Europeans. Yeah. Secondly, there is Allman W. Lauber's study of Indian slavery in colonial times from 1913. This is a great book we have read a lot over the years. We have broken this down, read a lot of it. The idea, shown how massive American Indian slavery really was. Right? This is neglected and ignored. A work which has been grossly neglected, okay? In recent decades, like I just said, neglected. I just said that. And thirdly, there are several early attempts to document or to note the significance of the Black American interaction, so-called black. See how they're trying to separate it, and he's trying to say, oh, but they were actually together, but he's still trying to say, no, they're the same peoples. They're the same peoples. You gotta tell me who you're talking about. Show me the genealogy. I wish to cite some of these works so as to illustrate a trend which has not been continued by and large since the 1930s. All right, so we're reviewing, we're discussing, we're critiquing, we're learning, educational purposes, fair use, right? As early as the late 19th century, the 19th annual report of the Bureau of American Ethnology. Pay attention to this. Now we're going to get to the sources, right? Now we're going to get to the drop. Forget his opinions, modern take on what he's seeing in the sources. His interpretations are not all 100%, but the sources are the sources. So what is the 19th annual report of the Bureau of American Ethnology? I've shown you guys this, right? I literally did a video recently reading that whole chapter, not just the excerpt, but it says again that the blood of the Southern Negroes of the U.S. is unquestionably Indian. All right? Unquestionably Indian. It continues saying the 1937 doctoral dissertation of James Hugo Johnston, belatedly published many years later, went further. All right? And I also just did a recent video reading that whole chapter, that whole dissertation by James Hugo Johnston. So there's an excerpt right here, and it says, there developed in the colonial period much intermixture of the Indian and the Negro slave. So again, who is this Negro slave? You can't just say that's an African, right? That could be an American Indian from another part of America. That could be a Black European. The class commonly called the mulatto is the result in many instances of the union of three racial elements. To the visitor in the South, the physical characteristics of many Negro slaves bore witness to their Indian origin, okay? They mix race with that race in America today is the result of the union of the Indian, the Negro and the white. So Negro, white, carrying colors. Show me the genealogy. We can't go off these tags, guys. They might be calling an Indian white. They might be calling a black person that's passing for white. The Negro could be the Indian. The Indian is a Negro. You get what I'm saying? So none of that makes sense the way they try to break it down. Okay, James 1937, he's admitting that black folks are Indians, but he's trying to add a little hijack. Oh, it's the mixture of the Negro. What is a Negro? That's not a country, guys. You know what I mean? All kinfolk and kinfolk, so you gotta understand, you gotta really ask what Negro, what is, we know American Indians were reclassified as Negroes, right? Negros de Terra, Portuguese, Spanish. Says Johnston also noted that many Indians were enslaved along the eastern seaboard. Many hundreds of thousands, millions. Yeah, the end of Indian slavery came with the final absorption of the blood of the Indian by the more numerous Negro slave. And who's this Negro slave? More Indians. But the blood of the Indian did not become extinct in the slave states, for it continued to flow in the veins of the Negro. Right? It's in your veins, Negro. It's in your blood, man. So you see how they're trying to say it went extinct. How can it go extinct? It's the same people. You still hear it. It never went extinct. You got reclassified, paper genocide. All right, they admitting it. They had literally admitting it. All right, that's what Johnston said in 1937. You remember who you are? In an article published in the Journal of Negro History, Johnston remarked, where the Negro was brought into contact with the American Indian, the blood of the two races intermingled. The Indian has not disappeared from the land. All right, listen, you have not disappeared from the land. Listen, he says, but it is now part of the Negro population of the United States. I'm going to say it correctly, but is now or has now been reclassified as the Negro population of the United States. All right, that's how it's. This is literally what they're admitting here, guys. Paper genocide, reclassification. You can't just be absorbed. Pay attention. That's hijack. You can't just be absorbed into something else, and now you're gone. Now your Indian is gone, and you're just a so-called Negro or Black or African American. That's hijack. It's still in you. It's in your blood. That means your bloodline. That means that's your ancestors. That means that's your nationality. That means that's your ethnicity. That's who you are. That's your ancestry. The latter statement might offend many Indians today. What Indians, huh? You mean reservation people that might, think they're the supposed Indian, and they might be a little prejudiced or racist towards Black folks, and they might be 132 3% Indians, or not even Indians at all, or one great grandpa or grandma that's an Indian while the rest are European or from somewhere else in the world. Yeah, that one you're talking about? Is that the Indian you're talking about? So some Indians might not like to hear what I'm saying. I agree with that, Mr. Jack Force. It may offend some of these people who still survive, who's in these reservations, of course, in great numbers as American Indians, but nonetheless, the significance of Johnston's thesis as regards the extent of Native American African intermixture, that's the hijack. Listen, the extent of how much Indian you are, basically, remains before us, nor was Johnston alone. Frank H. Russell, in his The Free Negro in Virginia, wrote in 1913 that one of the ways in which the free colored population grew was by the mixture of Indians and Negroes. Oh, free colors, huh? Indians and Negroes. So who's these Negroes again? You see how the primary sources never really said Africans. They said Negroes, and Negroes could be American Indians or Black Europeans. I'm going to keep repeating that. Make sure you guys understand and learn real history correctly. Real perspective, real foundation. Things you could actually research and find out and do your genealogy and see. He said also that there is no doubt that a considerable element in the free colored population of the 19th century was of Indian extraction. All right? Body bag. Shout out to Drop. Body bag, man. There is no doubt that a considerable element in the free colored population of the 19th century was of Indian extraction. You are the Indian. Free colored. Colored only, right? Remember, there was a time they said colored only. But a lot of those people were American Indians. Color don't mean ethnicity or nationality either, guys. That's a tag. They keep reclassifying people, paper genocide. They're admitting it. They have admitted it in their dissertations, in their anthropological books, in the Bureau of Ethnology, right? All over the place. And the Free Negro in Virginia, all over the place. One can also cite other authorities whose work caused them to consider the intermixture, right? We're talking about American Indians and Black Europeans, yeah. Stocks. Helen T. Catherall, in her work on slavery in Virginia, noted that we have shown that the first slaves were Indians, not Negroes. Okay? The first slaves were Indians. They weren't called Negroes yet. But you see what I'm saying? Like, it's crazy because what they're saying, these Indians, copper colored tribes, right? People of color, free people of color, right? Literally. But not Negroes, huh? Not Negroes yet on paper. You mean not? They haven't been reclassified yet. But they were the first slaves. It wasn't Africans. They were the first slaves. They had a homegrown population to enslave here. They didn't have to go to no other continent and risk anything. We've proven it over the years with the real ship manifest, with the real slaves on paper. We have shown this. In 19, sorry, not Negroes, and that the enslavement of Americans continued for many, many years. Okay, the enslavement of American Indians. It was massive. It continued. It was throughout the whole colonial conquest settlement period, manifest destiny up until even now, 1900s, but even now, right? In 1903, a historian of New Jersey noted that unions between Indians and so-called Negroes were so commonly frequent. All right, it was a common thing to see the Indians and the Negroes, right, together, huh? They are the same people. Indeed, as to have left permanent impress upon many families of Negroes of the present day. It's still you, man. You got reclassified, man. E.B. Reuter recognized in 1927 that, whatever mixture they think they got had taken place. They're saying Negroes and Indians, right? Because they never, none of those sources said African. These are modern people's interpretations and wording. Wording is not the facts. The facts is the primary sources. So the intermixture had taken place within slavery, and said the Indian slaves were gradually absorbed into the black population. Ha! Ha! So you was just absorbed, like you just disappeared, like absorbed, like absorption, like you just disintegrated into the blood of the Negro. Oh man, you see how silly that really is when they say the Indian slaves were gradually absorbed into the black. What? Black is a crayon color. That's not a real, that's not a nationality. That's not an ethnicity. That's a crayon color. So who is this black population, Mr. Reuter? What is their genealogy? Are you sure you're not talking about other Indians that have been reclassified? Are you sure you're not talking about some black Europeans too, mixed with Indians? Also, during the 1920s and 1930s, the Journal of Negro History frequently featured articles on black native relations in Massachusetts. Again, black cancels out. That's a crayon color, native, right? So you're talking about people of color, and they're all people of color up there in New England. Yeah. In Massachusetts, on Paul Cuffey. All right, we got a whole video of Paul Cuffey. His mom's Indian. That's what you can prove. You can't prove any African or anything like that. We have the whole video. We had the ChatGPT confirm it. There's no primary sources. We showed the primary sources admitting he's an Indian on his mom's side. That's all we can prove. A Negro don't mean African if that's what they're saying. His dad is a Negro, right? That's what we're talking about. He's a great example, actually. Thanks for bringing this up, Mr. Jack Force. Paul Cuffey, person of color, right? They're saying he's an example of red-black interaction. I would tell you he's an example of probably two different Indians, offspring of two different Indians, or maybe a possible black European and an Indian. Yeah. Also it says so. Within anthropology, a few scholars, such as Ashley Montagu, 1944, have recognized the significance of African American contacts. Within the discovery of the New World, intermixture between the Negroes and the indigenes of the West Indies began almost at once. It must be supposed that these Negroes from different parts of the world, right, in America, they put Africa, I'll say in America or Europe, right? That's the real history. Were already very thoroughly mixed among themselves. Oh, so even these Negroes were already mixed. This is what I've been trying to tell you. Who are these so-called Negroes? with themselves and with Indians of the islands and of the mainland of Brazil. So they're saying that they're admitting that these other people they're calling Negroes that they've been trying to say are Africans, that they are admitting that they know they might be Indians actually from Brazil. They're saying mixed, but they're only saying mixed because they're black. These, the Indians from Brazil were so-called black, were so-called Negroes. They were literally called Negroes by the Spanish and Portuguese. Negros de terra. So listen to what they're saying here. They're admitting that even these so-called Negroes that are mixing with the American Indians of North America are actually themselves supposedly be mixed with the Indians of the islands, Brazil. By the time most of them reached North America, they were Indians too, like I just said. Body bag right there. You just admitted it, and that's from a source, right? 1944, Ashley Montagu. That literally she did the research. She found out a lot of them were actually Indians. She's saying mixed because they're black, but she found out they were Indians. The mingling of Negroes and Indians, of course, occurred first in the West Indies. Who is these Negroes, huh? Mixing with the Indians. All right. They're admitting, though, that these Indians that they're transporting up to North America are already Indians, too. You see? It is significant that Montagu recognized that many of the slaves coming not directly from Africa, listen, not directly from Africa, but from the Caribbean. The Caribbean might have had American ancestry. Yeah, they were Indians, you see? They might have had American, they were Indians, guys. They're admitting this. Thus, it may be seen that not only was there much mixture between different varieties of Negroes on the island, different Negroes, right? Again, that could include Black Europeans as well, not just the Indians, right? But also complete mixture with the indigenous Indians, but also what? Indians, literally Indians, just Indians, complete Indians. These Negroes, complete Indians. The indigenous Indians, not the Hindu they're saying, but the indigenous, and sometimes with Indians who were not indigenous to these islands. Ooh, they were not indigenous. Indians that are not indigenous to, what does that mean? There was other Indians that are not from these places. They could have been other slaves, or they talking about Southeast Asians, or what they talking about? Interesting, right? So Montagu also recognized that once the people that they're calling black, right, or Negroes had reached North America, they were supposedly mixed with Americans, right? She's saying, right, Ashley? But again, if they can't prove the African part, then obviously you default to the Indian that they can prove. They know they're Indians. The available evidence indicates that ethnic mixture between Indians and Negroes has been a vastly greater proportions that has hitherto been realized. The American Negro population of today is a composite, they're saying, of when they say African, they mean people of color, right? And white, they mean European and Indian elements. So again, the African cancels out. If you do have so-called white or black European, yeah, element, but you're definitely Indians. You see what they have been admitting this whole time. They've been admitting this. These are real sources, guys. I've shown you these sources. The intermixtures, the greater proportions that has been realized. She's like, damn, there's a lot of black Indians I'm finding. That's what she's really finding. She's trying to explain it away by saying African, white, and Indian elements, huh? That's the hijack. You guys know, right? All we have proven the last 9 years, right? Make sure as we're reading this, we're breaking this down, right? We're doing a review for educational purposes, correcting the narrative, helping a modern, more informed way of interpreting what we are learning. The great job Mr. Jack Forbes did back in his time with writing this, but we have learned a lot more since then, and it is due to the people like Jack Forbes and others who have brought out information like this. What else are we supposed to do with information? We're not supposed to just stay stagnant and just believe everything that's in the book and just okay, like it's a story, and not follow up on it and not keep learning, right? We kept learning. That's what it was for. You help us realize certain things, and we kept researching, and we realized more things, right? So continues, says, unfortunately, however, the prevailing trend of more recent years has been similar to what happened to Alex Haley's roots. Uh-oh, what happened with Mr. Alex Haley's roots fictional story? What happened? He says, when it fell prey to the television script writers, Haley's book notes that the family absorbed Indian ancestry in the Carolinas, but this element was eliminated for television viewing. All right, so I don't think Mr. Jack Forbes knew that in the 70s, Alex Haley got sued for copying and plagiarizing a fictional book called The African, which he got all his idea for roots from. It's not a factual, it's not an autobiography of his family, it's a fake story he said was related to him. He made that up. All right? But listen to what Jack Forbes is saying. There is evidence of Alex Haley's Indian ancestry in the Carolinas, but even that was taken out. He took that out. Imagine, why would Alex Haley take that out? If he's all about remembering his roots, why would he eliminate his Indian ancestry and make himself just African? And then the whole story is based on a fictional story that he got sued for plagiarizing. Just wanted to make that clear. There are exceptions to the above trend, however, including J. Leach Wright Jr.'s The Only Land They Know, The Tragic Story of Americans of the Old South, 1981. These are books I have, actually, guys. I found almost all these books. I'm planning to read all of them with you. And Creeks and Seminoles, 1986. Got that one as well. And Daniel F. Littlefield's Studies of Africans and Seminoles. Got that one as well, 1977. The Cherokee Freedmen, 1978. Africans and Creeks, 1979. The Chickasaw Freedmen, 1980. All right, so we got That's the Hijack with some of these titles and what they're trying to interpret in modern times. Remember, these are books from the 1970s, 80s. These are modern books. They're just trying to make every person being called Negro or slave, or that is considered a person of color in colonial records and African in modern wording. Considerable controversy has developed at times among white writers as diversity is apparently not found among Afro-Americans, many of whom have told this writer of their Indian ancestry. So-called Afro-Americans telling the Jack Forbes, hey man, I'm an Indian, man. Others related the same thing to Melville, Herskovitz, August Mayer, and other researchers some years ago. Okay, they're all saying it, man. Everybody said they got an Indian grandma, grandfather, man. One of the basic problems is to actually go back to the empirical evidence, the historical record, to document the extent of African-American interaction and mixture. To do this, however, one must begin by clarifying the meaning of racial terms as used by early sources. The primary purpose here is to clarify the use of terms such as mulatto and free-colored in the British North American colonies, and incidentally, to shed preliminary light on the relations between Black Africans and Native Americans. Again, guys, remember, that's all the hijacks. We pull out the babies, all this supposed separating of people of color with Indians, that's a big hijack. Just keep reminding you of that, right? So if any mixture they're talking about, it would be American Indians, Black Europeans, or Europeans, in general, with Indians. As elsewhere, I will use the term American for Indians in the colonial era, right? And then he says, and I'm an African rather than Negro. See how he's turning Negro into African? So this is a big revelation. This is what I'm trying to tell you. These modern authors, they'd rather say African than Negro, when literally his whole chapter is crazy, because he kind of contradicts himself, because he's trying to teach that people have been reclassified to Negro. He literally, or people of color. In this same book, we literally read a whole chapter where Indians are being called Negroes, right? He's the one that told us about the Portuguese, terror, Negroes of the terror, or blacks of the land, right? They call Indians that. But at the same time, he'd rather change the word Negro into African. So that's why we got to be ready. When he's saying African, we're going to say Negroes, right? Or we just say people of color, you know? So he's saying sub-Saharan. What's sub-Saharan? Explicit definitions of the term mulatto. English writers began using the term mulatto, mulatto, or mulatto in the 1590s. The term was borrowed from Spanish and usually referred to persons met within the Caribbean or South America, huh? So nowhere else in the world, but mostly in the Caribbean, South America, huh? Early Spanish definitions of the term make it highly probable, indeed virtually certain, that such persons were usually, see how they're saying, half Negro and half Indian, right? So again, Indians were Negroes, so that all cancels out. Who are you talking about? We need to have a real context. We need to see the sources, the person you're talking about. We need to know his ancestry. You need to prove he's African. You're just talking about color. Yeah, Indians were of color. This could just be an Indian you're talking about. So John Mishu, I'm going to show you the dictionary, as already noted, defined mulatto in 1599 and in 1617 and later as a person who was the child of a Mauro or black Moor. So what is a mulatto? The son of a black Moor and one from another nation. So a black Moor and one from another nation. So you're saying a black Moor and it could be an Indian, another nation, right? It could be a black Irish, another nation, right? Black Moor, if I'm in Spain, is supposed to have different than Irish, right? So anybody from a different nation, and that would make a mulatto. Does that make sense in modern terms? When we think of mulatto today, we think in a white European, pale-skinned person mixing with an African descendant, right? A black person. Well, right here is letting you know that in 1500s, 1600s dictionaries, that's not what it meant. It was referring more to, almost related to the original origin, the Arab origin, remember? Black Moor, who's the so-called Black Moor? Almoravids, the original pure Arabs, well, the Almoravids becoming so-called Moors. I told you a lot of those Arabs and Christians that were in Spain. We read the chapter before. Remember chapter 5, guys, the other day, right? How it was breaking down the true origin of mulatto, and see how later on it's still almost being used in that kind of sense with another nation. Remember, another nation mixing with their Arabs. That was the mulatto, or the servant, or the one they were calling mulatto. He was the Christian who had converted right to Islam, and all kinds of different meanings. But you see a black Moor from another nation. So real quick, guys, I do have the dictionary here. I want to show you that, just so you guys can see it's actually real. It says a dictionary in Spanish and English, all done by J. Minshew, or John Minshew, the guy who he was just quoting, hereunto annex an English dictionary. This is from 1623, right? And we go to the M's and the bottom right here on the right, you guys see it says mulatta and mulatto. It says the daughter of a black Moor and one of another nation. You see? That is what a mulatto is. It could be two people of color. This is what I'm trying to tell you. If there's a so-called black Moor and then an Indian mixing, and this Indian is black or a person of color, right? Copper color, right? Then it's nothing to do with white or black mixing. Same thing with mulatto. They're saying the son of a black Moor and of another nation, as it says here, and one of another nation on the top here. Okay, so these are real. He's going to reference more dictionaries from Phillips Edward, The New World of English Words, 1658. I also have that one, and it says right here on the right, mulatto, Spanish, one whose father is a black Moor and his mother of another nation or contrary. You see, it's almost the same. Philip Edwards is saying the same thing, 1658. Thomas Blunt in 1661 as well. This is another dictionary, 1661. He's going to mention all this. I just wanted to show you guys that we have this. It says here, mulatto, the son of a woman black Moor. Now it's the opposite, right? The other one said contrary anyways. And a man of another nation. It could be a black Moor woman and an Indian man, right? That has nothing to do with white and black, right? White and African, right? Or a contra, or vice versa. One that is a mongrel complexion. Now they're talking about complexion, see? So 1661. And now we got another one from 1708. This is by John Kersey. Dictionarium Anglo-Britannicum, 1708. General English Dictionary says mulatto, one whose father is a black Moor and his mother of another nation, or whose mother is a Negro and his father of another country. Do you guys understand? See, it's not talking about color here. But see how they add the black more, and that's where it's going to its origin with the Arab source, the Arab origin that it has. Trying to do more with someone who's not a pure Arab, right? And it had nothing to do with complexion, really black or white. Now I want to show you one more before, again, he's going to mention a lot of these. This is the New English Dictionary, another one. This is also by John Kersey, but this is a 1731 different dictionary he did. And it says here, a mulatto, all the way to the left, a mulatto, one whose father is a black Moor or an Indian. See, now he's an Indian. So now we got an Indian, right? And his mother of another nation. So an Indian and a woman from another nation. That doesn't necessarily mean a white person. You guys understand? You see how it's been changing? And his mother of another nation, or whose mother is a Moor, a black European Moor, huh? And his father of another country. His father could be the Indian, so vice versa. Do you see, this is the general mixture. If there is any mixture, guys, it's black Europeans with American Indian. Of any other nation, though, they're not talking about color. Mulatto didn't have anything to do with color. All right, I just wanted to show you guys these examples. These are real. These are old 1600s and 1700s. We're going to go back to the book now. So again, he was saying, John Minshew, he called the child of a black Moor and a person from another nation. This extremely accurate and timely definition reflected Spanish usage very well, reflected what the people understood the word to mean at that time. Okay, now let us review other early English dictionaries. John Florio, 1611, does not include mulatto in his dictionary, but has mulatto, a little or young mule, and mulo, a horse mule, also a bastard or misbegotten. Henry Cockerham, 1623, does not have mulatto, but has a black Moor Ethiop. Black Moor Ethiop. Thomas Blunt, 1656, continues the Minshew definition. He says mulatto, the son of a black Moor and a man of another nation. Or contra, that is a mongrel complexion in mulatto. So we saw they kind of messed up on the thing. It's a woman and a man, right? Edward Phillips, 1658. I showed you these, right? The Thomas Blunt one and the Edward Phillips. 1658 states mulatto, one whose father is a black Moor and his mother of another nation or country. But in 1702, John Kersey also showed two of his dictionaries, right? Broadens the scope of the concept. A mulatto, the son of a Negro or Indian woman, and a man of another nation, or a Negro man and a woman of another country. It should be noted that this nicely coincides with Virginia's legal definition of 1705 that a European American mixed blood is a mulatto and would seem to reflect some tendency in usage. We may also note that the term Negro replaces blackamoor. You see? So blackamoor, they're not really specific, talking about a specific Moor, right, from Portugal or Spain. Sometimes they just meant Negro. That could be an Indian. In the dictionary, although the 1708 Kersey usage is somewhat different, he says mulatto, one whose father is a black Moor and his mother of another nation, or whose mother is a Negro and his father of another country. All right? So guys, I mean, come on now, like, wow, you should be amazed. You should be shocked. Like, yeah, this is not what I thought mulatto meant. How did it be? Today, people will, you go to AI, probably, ask AI, what does mulatto mean? It's going to give you the hijack explanation of what modern people think of mulatto means, not what it actually meant in history, what if I've shown you so far, right? Continues, says Chambers Cyclopedia 1727, 41 states mulatto, a name given in the Indies to those in the Indies, right, in America, to those who are begotten by a Negro man or an Indian woman. Oh, so it has nothing to do with white folks, huh? mixing with black folk. A Negro man and an Indian woman. Well, this Indian woman is a person of color too. What Negro man? That could be an Indian. That could be a black European. Or an Indian man on a Negro woman. Again, what Negro? Who are they? Show me the genealogy, ancestry, the primary sources that should manifest. This significant definition, so like curses of 1702, undoubtedly reflects Spanish usage as well as practice in South Carolina and other English colonies, all right? This is what they're using the word mulatto on straight, of people of color mixing. So it makes no sense. They were just talking about two different people, different nations, different tribes, different parts of the world. That had nothing to do with color. The various dictionaries of N. Bailey, 1728 to 61, define mulatto as one born of parents of whom one is a Moor. Listen, but you see how it keeps going back to Moor, huh? One is a Moor and the other of another nation. So what was mulatto really eventually starting to be used for? The black Europeans who were mixing with Indians. Another nation? What other nation is here? The Indians, right? What other nation was here? He also states that a Moor is a native of Mauritania in Africa. A blackamoor, this would seem to imply that a mulatto could be the child of North African and a non-North African, as well as of black African. Okay, so with the whole African. Again, blackmoor could be a Negro, could be just replaced with Negro. Negro could just be Indian, so we have to be really open-minded to what they're talking about, not be biased and say, oh, yeah, he's a Moor, in North African. No, again, they're going with the African hijack. But I thought the slaves were from West Africa. Now you're talking about Mauritania. Now you're talking about North Africa. Now you're talking about something totally different than what you told us at school. So where did you get them? From North Africa or West Africa? It says the different approach appears in an English-Portuguese dictionary, 1701. The English side does not have the term mulatto, while the Portuguese term is defined as that mixture between a white and a black. Crayon colors. 1701 English, black is translated as escuro. Oh, so they're not saying black, they're saying any person who's dark complexion, oscuro or dark, and sombria, shady, somber, as well as negro and preto. So anybody with that description, but that doesn't explain their origin of birth, right? That doesn't mean they're African, right? So Samuel Johnson in 1756 is the first English only dictionary maker to permanently link mulatto to a black-white mixture. You see that? Now he's the first guy to start saying, well, it just means a light-skinned person and a dark-skinned person. People start creating things in these so-called dictionaries. What is this guy's intention, Samuel Johnson? Who is he? Is he a gatekeeper? Is he a Freemason? They got to understand that part of history too. What is the intention of these people? Right? So anyways, totally off from the original meaning, right? And he's the first person to make it a whole black-white mixture thing, Again, that could still mean status. When he's saying it in 1750, he can mean white. Remember, there's black folks passing as white, there's Indians being called white. White could be owning a house or people owning land and you're not in bondage or slavery. And then black could be just because you're in servitude, you're in slavery, not just complexion. Okay, so English black is okay. We got that part. Sorry. He states mulatto. Spanish, one begot between a white and black. 1785. He states mulatto. Mulat, French, from mulus, Latin, one begot between a white and a black, as a mule between different species of animals. Johnson's attitude may well reflect a change in usage and also a growing racism. You see? A growing racism, people start making it about color. But we must know that the term black is not defined, okay? Black doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean, that automatically means African. James Buchanan, 1757, continued the trend. Mulatto, one born of parents of whom one is black and the other so-called white. He continued the trend, the racist trend. Buchanan is the first compiler to include a term for other kinds of mixed bloods, mestizo. Now he has mestizo. Now he's adding more hijack. The breed of Spaniards with Americans. Okay, well, that could be black Spaniards. Again, like Europeans. Oh, black Moor? or a crypto Jew or crypto Muslim, right? Yeah, same meaning. They're just switching up the wording and trying to influence you to think it means about color. The significance of this will be noted later, but it should be stressed here that terms such as half-breed, half-blood, and half-caste never appear with a racial meaning in any of the above dictionaries. Noah Webster's in his 1828 dictionary fails to include mestizo, but he does have musty, mesti, a person of mixed breed, West Indies, mixed with what? And mulatto, a person that is the offspring of negres by a white man, or a white woman by a negro. Okay, yeah. Sure, 1800s, the hijack is in full effect by the 1800s. Thus, we can see a rather clear pattern. First, the term mulatto is the only term available for referring to persons of mixed race until 1757. Second, until 1756, mulatto usually refers to a person half African, that's the hijack, or a person they believe to be of Negro blood, they call him Negro, and have something else, but with half American, half another nation usage in 1702, and American and African. All right, so that's the hijack. So we already know to cancel out the fake narratives with the real ones, and you make sense of it in your way, okay? After 1750s, the so-called half black, half white, right? Again, crayon colors, that doesn't mean nothing. Usage becomes dominant, but they're starting to use this half black, half white. They're trying to create this a trend. They're trying to create these labels and tags in the 1750s, racist views of it. Usage becomes dominant and replaces half African, half another nation. Remember, half African, he may have Negro, and Negro didn't mean African. It could have been Indian. Half Indian and half another nation. Hey, that could be a black European. That could be, all right. It should be noted also that from at least 1741, the term mulatto is used to designate a certain type of land or soil, sometimes described as a black mold and red earth. Okay. So if you want to get technical when it comes to soil and the color of mulatto, they talking about black mold and red earth. Come on now. People of color, right? Couple colored tribes of America, right? 1789, or the red or mulatto lands. 1883, it's being used as color. Now they're making it a color. This would tend to point in the direction of the term being used as a general marker for some shade of color. But you saw the comparisons, right? Black mold and red earth. Come on now. That's what you are. Adam from the earth, right? Copper colored Adam was so-called red man. The 1933 edition of the Oxford English Dictionary follows that tendency in stating mulatto, right? Mulatto, young mule, hence one of mixed race, one who is of offspring of European and a Negro, also used loosely. So that's 1930s, the hijack, and full effect. The incubated babies took over and everything, full effect. White superiority, all that stuff. So one who is the offspring of a European and a Negro, also used loosely for any half-breed resembling a mulatto. That's from 1933, right? Hijack in full effect. This reflects a great deal of early usage cited by the Oxford English Dictionary as when a British traveler speaks in 1789 of the mulattoes, or as they are called in the East Indies, half-caste. Nonetheless, a 1940 dictionary tends to narrow the meaning somewhat, and it says in 1940, another dictionary, a person who is mulatto, a person who is the offspring of a Negro and a white person. You see? Now it's been making it about Negro. What's a Negro? White what? And white blood. Designating soils of brownish color. Designating soils of brownish color. Thus, gradually the term comes to refer to persons of mixed white, European, and black African ancestors. That's the hijack. That's the theory. That's the modern version. Regardless of that exact degree of mixture, this usage is, however, not always the one actually used by legislative bodies and the courts, as will be analyzed below. It should be noted that it is very likely that from the beginning, the English used the term mulatto to refer to a wide range of brown mixed bloods, especially since the precise ancestry of most such persons could not be known. Such usage is reflected in Blunt's 1656 definition above, one that is of mongrel complexion, and also in remarks such as that of Robert Hooke in 1664, We find by relations how much the Negro woman do besmear the offspring of the Spaniards, bringing forth neither white skin nor black, but tawny, hided mulattoes. Hided mulattoes? Huh. You see what they're saying? In fact, virtually all of the early English references to mulattoes, 1590s to 1600s, are to individuals whose precise ancestry is unknown. All right? Pay attention. That's an important detail right there. A lot of the reference to people being called mulattoes in the 1590s and 1600s, okay, are to individuals whose precise ancestry is unknown and whose origin usually has a Spanish connection or at least a West Indian one. Body bag, man, for the illusion. Yo, shout out to Drop, man. You guys see how they're admitting it? They're literally saying, well, a lot of times it didn't mean nothing because we don't even know who the individual was, his ancestry. And what we do know is that it has something to do with the West Indies and the Americas, his origin. Whose origin? Connected to the West Indian, not Africa. And again, they don't know these people's ancestry, so you don't know if he's half white, half black, crayon colors, or a white European, or an African, or whatever they're trying to say, man. That's a big one right there. Remember that right here, guys. Are you guys enjoying the reading? This is major drops going on, you know? We're about to get even deeper with it. Like, this chapter gets pretty good. It says here, continuing, legal definitions. Explicit legal statutory definitions of the term mulatto are surprisingly few in the colonial period. General usage will be examined below, but first it is necessary to review those explicit references which do exist. We shall begin with Virginia, because that colony is thought to have exercised considerable influence on other areas. In 1705, the Virginia prohibited any Negro, mulatto, or Indian. See how they're grouped together? Again, none of that other than the Indian shows ancestry, right? So if you cancel those other two, what are you left with? You're left with Indian only, right? You're left with one thing you can prove ancestry on. Mulatto don't mean ethnicity or like oh, this proves you're from Africa and that your parents are European. No, Negro doesn't either. So pay attention to this. They're grouping these people together, right? 1705 prohibited any Negro, mulatto, or Indian from holding any public office. The act further stated, right? It's going to tell you, but they're disfranchising people of color, right? Can't vote now. And for clearing, and this is what they continue saying, they're saying, and for clearing all manner of doubts which hereafter may happen to arise upon the construction of this act, or any other act, who shall be accounted a mulatto, be it, listen to this part, guys, be it that the child of an Indian and the child, grandchild, or great-grandchild of or a Negro shall be deemed, accounted, held, and taken to be a mulatto. Okay, that is a real statute. I sent you that from the statute laws. I think it's Hennick. I forget the last name. But I've shown you the actual primary source, guys, where they're literally telling you Indians and Negroes are to be called mulattoes. Indians and Negroes are to be called mulattoes. They don't specify whether they're saying if they mix or not, but either way, if they mix, they're talking about mulattoes, right? So again, nothing to do with white folks, right? Even the statute laws telling you has nothing to do with white folks. Taken to be a mulatto, who? The child of an Indian and the child of a grandchild, great-grandchild, or a Negro shall be deemed, accounted, held, and taken to be mulatto, okay? Mulatto, that's what mulatto meant in the statute law. It had nothing to do with white folks with pale skin or just color, all right? Pay attention. Who is this Negro? Who are the Indians? Show me the ancestry. In other words, an American-European mixed blood was defined as a mulatto. You see? American European don't mean pale skin. They can be black Europeans. Along with all part or Negroes, right? Anybody who's of color, 1/8 degree, they're saying. 1/8 degree Negro blood, what is that? That's the hijack. That's modern racist concepts. This statute apparently remained unmodified until 1785, when it was enacted that all persons with one-fourth or more Negro blood shall be deemed a mulatto. Ah, this remained the legal definition until 1866 when it was modified. You see how they start adding these hijack statute laws, disfranchising you even more, reclassifying you, paper genocide, making it illegal. In 1866, when it was modified, every person they saying having one-fourth or more Negro blood shall be deemed a colored person. You see that? Every person having one-fourth or more Negro blood, and where are they determining how much blood, quantum, and all this? That's hijack, guys. Who's determining, who's doing the blood test, who's doing all that in 1800s? I'm really trying to make you think logically. They just reclassed it. That's paper genocide. That's just Walter Plecker back in the 1800s. That's just another form of what Walter Plecker did. They're turning what? Anybody they thought had so-called Negro, but Negro ain't ethnicity. The Indians look Negro. Negroid, right? They were people of color. So what do you mean? You can turn anybody that you thought had Negro blood into a person of color. Change your status from American Indian to person of color. Or a colored person, right? Or a colored person. And every person not a colored person having one-fourth or more Indian blood shall be deemed an Indian. So people that are not colored, they're literally admitting ethnic cleansing, whitewashing, and allowing people to be Indians based on complexion. Based on complexion. That is so messed up. That is inhumane. That would be so illegal if explained this way, really. But that's literally what they're saying. That would be so against the United Nations, and that's ethnic cleansing. That's genocide. Come on now, they're admitting that. They did law, they made statutes, guys. You paying attention? This is why you don't remember who you are. That's why you're being called so many things today, except what you really are. This is deep right here. They said what? That every person that is not colored, having one-fourth or more Indian, what Indian? Who is the Indian you're making them, you're basing that up? Could be deemed an Indian. These could also be colored folks, they get through. They pass. This use of colored person must be considered in relation to an 1860 statute using mulatto for persons of one-fourth African descent, and making Negro and mulatto equivalent in all statutes. It would appear then that from 1705 until 1866, the only legal definition applying to mixed American Indians, excepting those having one-fourth or more, what they're calling African, but it's actually Negro in the original sources, right, was that of 1705. Thus, we might at first glance construe that a mixed American European was legally a mulatto if of one-half or more American blood until the statute of 1866 making such persons Indians. All American and what they're calling Black Indians or American Africans, that's what they call them, mixed bloods, or all Black Indians, right, so-called, remained mulattoes throughout the period. All right, you hear that? Unless having less than 1/8 African ancestry, that's the hijack, Negro blood, they're trying to say in their hijack blood quantum theories and hijacks, right? Or less than 1/4 Negro. After 1910, Virginia reclassified large numbers of persons by extending the colored category to include people with minute amounts of Negro blood, right? They call them African. Again, remember, Indians are being classified as Negroes, so we don't know who they talking about, really. They could just be talking about Indians this whole time. It should be noted that in actual practice, some Virginia officials seem to have assumed after 1785 that all mulattoes possess 1/4 or more what they're calling a Negro ancestry, right? Again, that could be Indians. For example, a white petition asserted in 1843 that the American Indians of King William County, Pamunkey, and Mattaponi reservations, all of whom by the laws of Virginia, should be deemed and taken to be free mulattoes. You guys hear that? What happened in 1843 to the Pamunkey and Mattaponi Indians? They were to be reclassified as free mulattoes. All of them. You guys hear that, right? Did they talk about why? Did they explain, oh, because they are mixed between white and black? No, they didn't say none of that. They just said, we're going to just change them into free mulattoes. You guys hear that? 1843, Pamunkey and Mattaponi Indians. As it is believed, they all have 1/4 or more of Negro blood. It is believed because they look so-called black. They believe. They believe they have Negro blood because they look so-called black. What is a Negro? Indians were Negroes. So, that doesn't mean they can't be Indian. They most likely could be Indians then. Or even black European descendants or mix. It says in 1857, some local whites took away the Pamunkey's people's guns. The Indians complained to the governor, and he wrote back that the law in question did not apply to Indians, but that if anybody become 1/4 mixed with the Negro race, so-called, right, then they may be treated as free Negroes or mulattoes. All right. So again, guys, we're reading this as reference. I want you guys to see the hijack in these laws and these statutes and the whole history. You guys see? And again, people didn't understand. I have all the context back then. But you see what they're doing to Indians, right? Now they may be treated as free Negroes or mulattoes. Free Negroes, right, apply to Indians if they look so-called black. Thus, we might conclude that sometime around the War of Independence, the term mulatto acquired in Virginia the same meaning assigned to it earlier by some English dictionary makers. That is, that of a part Negro person, right? Again, that's the hijack. All that cancels out. None of this makes sense. Still further, it is clear that as late as 1843 to 57, a person of mixed American and what they're saying Negro, right, ancestry was considered to be a mulatto. So again, nothing to do with white folks, nothing to do with white people mixing with black people, right? If they're saying a Negro and an American Indian mixing makes a mulatto, then where's the white person? And again, who's the Negro? Talking about two people of color. Talking about possibly two Indians mixing. Possibly from different nations, right? Different tribes. Or possibly an American Indian and a black European mixing. Again, nothing to do with white or pale skin mixing with a black, so-called black crayon color. This differs, of course, from those later dictionary definitions limiting the term to European, right, Negro mixed bloods. European and Negro mixed bloods, Black European and Indians and Negroes, and But there are exceptions and usage which will be noted below. During the 19th century, the courts of Virginia seem to have ordinarily limited the use of the term mulatto to persons of 1/4 or more non-white ancestry. Non-white, non-European, non-white or what? Non-free status landowner. For example, in 1847, two brothers of Culpeper County, William and John Ross, were alleged to be mulattoes. The court found that their grandfather David Ross was spoken of as a respectable man, though probably a mulatto, was a soldier in the Revolution and died in the service. His wife was probably white, listen, probably, maybe, I don't know, probably, see how they're guessing? And his son's wife certainly was what? White. Why? The Supreme Court held that Ross brothers were legally white. So they were mulatto, then they were legally white. These could be passing for white. These could be folks that are passing for white. White could mean something else. Remember, look at all the controversy behind it. Why do they have to go to court? Why is it a thing? Because somebody's hiding something. Somebody is something. But it's not a crayon color for sure. South Carolina was another early leader in developing racial classification terms, somewhat independent of Virginia. Spanish practice seems to have greatly influenced this colony, especially in the use of the term musti or mestizo, for a certain type of part American mixed blood. Mestizo always deals with some kind of Indian, some form, right? The government of colonial South Carolina would appear to have almost never directly defined racial terms, but one instance is of great value to us. In 1719, South Carolina decided who should be an Indian for tax purposes. Listen to what they're saying. In 1719, again, South Carolina decided who should be an Indian for tax purposes. Since American slaves were taxed at a lesser rate than the Negro slaves, right? The ones that are being labeled Negro. Remember, he already admitted to us that he's going to be using African instead of Negro. He'd rather use, but it was Negro in the sources. So these Negro slaves could be American Indians or Black Europeans. Again, you guys been paying attention to what I'm saying? Putting that into context? Do I have to keep repeating that, or should I keep reminding you? Again, American slaves were taxed at a lesser rate than the imported or the ones being labeled as Negroes. The ones that were admittedly Indian got less. The act stated, and for preventing all doubts and scruples that may arise what ought to be rated on musties, mulattoes, etc. All such slaves as are not entirely Indian shall be accounted as Negro. If he's not entirely Indian, just call him a Negro. You see? So again, when they're saying lesser rate than none of those people were called African, they were called Negroes. So what Negroes are we talking about again? Not entirely Indian, huh? They're trying to reclassify you. It says this is an extremely significant passage because it clearly asserts that musties and mulattoes were persons of part American ancestry. You see? Whenever you say mulatto, musty, there's some Indian in there when these colonial records. You got to prove the African. My own judgment, to be discussed later, is that a musty must primarily part Negro, he's saying, an American. So again, that's the hijack with their modern takes on what Negro means, and that a mulatto was usually part European and American. That act is also significant because it asserts that part Americans with or without African ancestry, again, part Americans with or without African ancestry, could be counted as Negroes. Without having any African ancestry, they could be counted as Negroes. So this is what I'm saying. This is my point the whole time. Right, guys? You see, this is what I'm saying. So what Negroes are you talking about that you're trying to call African now? Thus having an application for all later slave census. There you go. Again, does have an implication for all later slave census. So when you say Negroes in these census, it doesn't mean African slaves. It could be Indians. It could be Europeans. As will be indicated below, South Carolina colonial legislation makes frequent reference to Negroes, mulattoes, musties, and Indians, both as slaves and as free persons. Okay? Free persons, slaves, and free persons. Who? All Indians, mulattoes, it's all the same. It's all taxed, both as slaves and as free persons. This usage continued into the 19th century, but new meanings were gradually assigned to the terms. An important factor was doubtless the complete assimilation of American slaves into the general slave population. Okay, with the other American Indian slaves and Europeans, and to some extent a similar absorption. There we go again with the absorbing. Absorption of Americans within the free colored group. They were free colored. Indians, you literally said that earlier. So what free colored group? Other Indians that have been labeled free colored. Absorbing, you can't, the blood is still there, man. In any case, there are many court cases from 1829 onward involving discussions of the term mulatto. In the year, the Supreme Court stated that when the words Negro, mulatto, etc. are used in statutes for the purpose of designating a class, they are to be interpreted by their common acceptation, which in the case of mulatto meant offspring of, again, there you go with the crayon colors in modern terms, black and white, right? So it says there is no legal definition of the term mulatto. In the first of the cases, a judge said that a mulatto was the offspring of parents, one white and another black, and that he was supposed to think that where the white blood predominated, this disqualification of mulatto status ought not to attach. It is certainly true that every admixture of Negro blood with the European or white is not to be referred to the degraded class. It would be dangerous and cruel to subject to this disqualification persons bearing all the features of white on account of some remote admixture of Negro blood, nor has the term mulatto or persons of color, I believe, been popularly attributed to such a person. Where there is a distinct and visible admixture of Negro blood, the person is to be denominated a mulatto or person of color. It is a question very proper for a jury. Again, so the hijacks on top of hijacks, right? This is in the mind of a hijack here after reclassifications and paper genocide. Now, all that cancels out. But we're reading it anyway, so you guys can see we're not trying to hide it. We're reading it anyway. It says, South Carolina judges, in other words, gradually extended the term to be virtually an equivalent to colored person. Now, mulatto just meant colored person. Listen. And to include persons visibly, or Negro, visibly, that look like visibly. It's all based on appearance then, huh? Not genealogy. Pay attention, guys. Regardless of actual degree of blood. See? Regardless of actual degree, regardless of the genealogy, the ancestry. It's all about appearance, huh? In 1846, this was stated even more explicitly. Look at the hijack says, the constant tendency of this class mulattoes to assimilate to the white and the desire for elevation present frequent cases of embarrassment and difficulty. It would be difficult, if not impolitic, to define by inflexible rules the lines of separation. The question of the reception of colored persons into the class of citizens must partake more of a political than a legal character, and in a great degree be decided by public opinion expressed in the verdict of a jury. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Regardless of the appearance of liberality, the court consistently drew the line at somewhere between 1/8 and 1/16 Negro ancestry, all right? Again, that whole one drop, and that's all hijack, 1/8 this, quadroon, and mulattoes, and all this other stuff. Hijack on top of hijacks. Still further, the father of the litigant, one Elijah Bass, the Bass family, the Nansemond Indians, huh? Although showing some unspecified non-European features, had apparently been treated as a white man. He passed for white, Elijah Bass. Remember, they probably treated him white status because he's an Indian and his children had married white people. Oh, so they just kind of lined up, huh? Throughout the years. Thus, the court was in some ways more conservative than the local white community. And it is possible that Bass had American ancestry, since Bass people often have Indian affiliation to the South. In the South, yeah, we're talking about the Nansemond, right? It is clear from a decision of 1850 that persons of American descent, in order to escape from the status of mulatto or colored person, had to prove that they were of free Indian descent, okay? Unmixed with African blood. You had to prove, now they're demanding you to prove, when they know they're the ones who reclassified you, but now they're demanding you to prove it now. The case is as follows. Now listen to this. Amelia Marchant was challenged as a witness on the grounds that she was a person of color, okay? This is a real court case we're about to get into that I've done a couple lately too. I've shown you. So this is one of them. Amelia Marchant was challenged as a witness on the grounds that she was a person of color, okay? They're like, but you black. You can't be an Indian. Huh. It was argued on her behalf that her grandparents were free Indians. Her grandparents were free Indians, and also that her father, James Mitchell, listen, was a Portuguese, okay? Body bag. What kind of Portuguese? We're talking about a crypto Jew? Portuguese? Moorish? What kind of Portuguese we talking about? See? You gotta know, you gotta understand and have the context we have in the last 9 years with all the research. It fits the genealogy. That's what I'm trying to tell you. A so-called black Moor mixing with another nation, huh? So-called mulatto, huh? Paying attention, so Portuguese. He mixed with some Indians, all right? and Amelia Marchand, as a descendant of both of them. Opponents said that Mitchell had associated with colored persons and was so considered. And so he was considered colored because he associated with them or because he was colored. Huh. The verdict was in Marchand's favor. That is, that she was of free Indian ancestry and that she had no African blood. Body bag. Look it up. That's a real case. This person was being called a Negro, a person of color. They're trying to, enslave her and all that. She's like, no, man, I don't have no African or Negro blood. Or labeled, right? Negro. Anything to do with anybody being labeled Negro, she doesn't descend from anybody labeled Negro. Indians and Portuguese, huh? Indians and black Europeans, like I've been saying. No Negro blood, supposed Negro blood, right? She is colored though, right? They call her a person of color, right? She would be labeled a Negro today or an African American. But she's an Indian and Portuguese blood, right? The Supreme Court reviewed the case and reversed the verdict. That's what happened in spite of the fact that the Mitchells had paid no capitation tax charged to free colored people. And that James Mitchell had apparently married a white woman, so-called. The grounds for reversal were in part that many Indians had been enslaved and that the Mitchells came under the status of colored persons. Apparently because they could not prove descent from free Indians in amity with South Carolina. Wow. You guys hear the whole hijack story of why they're trying to make them free people of color. If nothing else, this 1850 case illustrates that persons of American blood could still be considered to be mulattoes. Okay? Indians or colored persons in South Carolina. Okay? Indians, especially if a suspicion of Negro ancestry existed. In Georgia, which usually followed the lead of South Carolina, a wealthy Spanish Floridian of alleged mixed Negro and American ancestry was held to be a mulatto by a lower court. The higher court in 1856 reversed this decision and held him to be a so-called white man. Oh man! So he went from fighting the I ain't a color, a mulatto, whatever. Then he got to legally say he's or be called a white man. Status, guys. I told you it's not about complexion. Status. Reverse the decision. Man, he was almost called an African. Now he's a white man. The other English colonies in North America seemingly failed to develop legal definitions for the various racial terms used in their statutes. Court cases occasionally shed light on meanings, as in Delaware, where a woman was freed from slavery because she was descended in the female line from a native of Asia. Wow, her grandmother. Of Asia, huh? What kind of Asia? What part of Asia? Slavery, it was said, extended only to Negroes and mulattoes. Descended from a female Negro, her father was a Negro, and she apparently was classified as a mulatto. So you see that? We got an Asian person, could be a colored Asian, black, so-called black Asian, mixing with a so-called Negro man, and then she was called mulatto. Many states adopted legal definitions after 1800. They are typified by the following examples, all right? We're going to read some of these. We're going to dodge the hijack as we do, right? It says, Indiana, every person other than a Negro, of whose grandfathers or grandmothers anyone is or shall have been a Negro, though his other progenitors may have been a white, shall be deemed a mulatto, and so every person who shall have 1/4 part or more of Negro blood. Indiana also asserted that no Negro, mulatto, or Indian could be witness in cases involving white persons, all right? Disfranchisement. If they're not the same people, why are you grouping them as the same people and disfranchising them the same way? You guys see? Peep that? California, 1850. Persons having 1/8 or more of Negro blood shall be deemed mulattoes, and persons having 1/2 of Indian blood shall be deemed Indians. No black or mulatto person or Indian shall give evidence in a case involving a white person. In general, the statutes defining the term mulatto Always do so in such a way as to include virtually any American or Negro hybrid, provided that the Negro ancestry is 1/4 or more, 1/8 or more, and so on, depending on the time period. Now, guys, by now you should already know, but when I'm saying Negro, right? When I'm just substituting African for Negroes, because the author already said he'd rather use African instead of Negro, as in the primary sources it says Negro. He literally admitted that earlier. And then Negro could mean American Indian or a Black European. I want you to have that in mind every time I say Negro mixing with an Indian. They mean Indians in North America. So they could be mixing with another Indian, right? Negro. Or they could be mixing with another Black European, right? Negro. Okay? Just have that in mind. It says, Alabama, however, tended to classify all part Americans and part Negroes in the same colored group. Same colored group, you see? It's all the same. They say it's all colored folk. It's all colored folk. Same colored group. All Negroes, mulattoes, Indians, and all persons of mixed blood descended from Negro or Indian ancestors to the third generation inclusive, though one ancestor of each generation only have been a white person, whether bond or free, shall be taken and deemed incapable in law to be witnesses except for or against each other. That's the hijack. In 1859, an Alabama court classified mixed persons of apparently part American, part Negro, and part European descent as mulattoes. Could just be European and Indians here. Colonial tax rolls seldom give racial characteristics, but there are exceptions which will be reviewed when pertinent. So this is a part of the book or the chapter when it's talking about census and other extra legal definitions. All right. Hope you enjoyed the reading so far. Thank you for being here. In Virginia, many early tax rolls are missing. However, one can use fairly continuous records from 1783 onward. There seems to be a common trend in these documents as reflected by the rolls of Charles City County from 1783 to the early 1800s. No race is given for free persons. All are classified for tax purposes as white titleable. Guys, hear that? There is no race given for free persons. Free persons, again, why they pointing this out? Because the free persons could include free persons of color. Anybody who's considered a free person, so-called white, so-called black. And so there's no distinguishment in these census, is what they're letting you know, right? But they're all being called white. So that could include so-called black people, so-called, right? Or black Americans, right? Free people of color. That could include that. Being taxed as whiteable. Pay attention, being classed as white. This is what I've been trying to explain to people. From 1809 to 1812, free Negro is placed after the names of some free persons, but mixed bloods are still treated as white. Mixed bloods are not mulattoes or Negroes, they're white. Pay attention, beginning in 1813, however, the word mulatto appears beside mixed people's names, along with free Negro for others. Persons who can be identified as Chickahominy Indians, all right, or as ancestors of the present-day Chickahominy are uniformly classified as mulattoes, okay? Body bag for the illusion. Shout out to Drop, man. Drop, man. Chickahominy Indians classified as mulattoes. Chickahominy Indians classified as mulattoes. Chickahominy Indians classified as mulattoes. You want me to repeat it again? A similar trend occurs in King William, King and Queen, Caroline, and Essex counties, except that Indians living on the two small reservations in Kings William, the Pamunkey and the Mattaponi, generally do not appear on the tax rolls since their land was not taxable. So what? Similar trends occur where? In King William and King Queen Caroline and Essex counties. And all these places, all the Indians are what's going on? They're being classified as mulattoes, as mulattoes. All the Indians without any proven ancestry to do with any African or even white, so-called white European. Pay attention, guys. This is important. This is the drop. This is drop going on. Right now, we're dropping a lot of nuggets, a lot of understanding, a lot of context, a lot of hijacks for you guys to see as well. How you got disfranchised and reclassified, paper genocide, the process of that. Okay. On the other hand, relatives. So there's people going through this, being classified as mulattoes. And on the other hand, relatives of the reservation, Indians having taxable property or living off reservation normally are classified as mulatto or free colored Indians classified as free colored only, right? Remember what happened in the 1900s, colored only, whites and colored only over here, whites over there, colored over there. You can't go in here, you can't sit in the front of the bus, you can't colored, right? Free colored, right? Free colored. Indians being classified to free colored because they're living off or outside the reservations, or relatives of the same Indians, their cousins, and they're the Indians coming from the same grandparents, but now the other people are free colored and the other people living inside their right Indians. In the other counties, Indians are classified as above, right, free colored, but also in several cases as free Negro. Boom, body bag. Shout out to Drop, man. Free Negro. Who? Indians are classified as free Negroes. Again, Indians are classified as free Negroes. Again, Indians are classified as free Negroes. You have to repeat it. You think I'm making this up? This is real history. So when you're telling me that Indians are mixing with Negroes that you want to call Africans, how do you know these Negroes aren't Indians since this is the norm? You're literally reporting it. You're literally showing us. That is the real history. That's what the primary sources are telling us, guys. This really happened. Paper genocide, reclassification, disfranchisement. This really happened. This really happened. It is very rare to see a person classified as Indian in pre-Civil War Virginia records and never in the above counties where the bulk of Indians were then concentrated. Wow. They're like, hey man, they know the whole town is full of Indians. They know the whole history. They know who the people are there living, right? They know who these people are. They know who their ancestors are. But you will never see them being classified as Indian, right? Only free colored or Negroes, free Negroes. A similar situation exists in relation to early United States records. The first census, 1790, forced the local enumerator to place all free persons in two categories: white or all other free persons except Indians not taxed. You see the hijack? You understand the context behind it now? Most families known to be of Indian extraction in Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, and elsewhere, Virginia is missing, were placed in the all other free persons category. Okay? All Indians. They were placed in what? All other free persons category. Occasionally, however, the enumerator also wrote in their specific racial status. Thus, we find in South Carolina, Jordan Chavers, all right, the Chavis or Chavers family, Eastern Sioux, mostly Catawba Saponi families, right? The Chavis, shout out to the Chavers or Chavis families. Jordan Chavers of Chara, the Sarah people, again, Eastern Sioux people, related to the Catawba Saponi, classified as mulatto. So John Chavers of the Chera Indians or the Sarah Indians, Eastern Sioux people, right? Classified as mulatto. And Hannah Chavis, they're the same family, Chavers and Chavis, same family of Edgeville, classified as mulatto. The Chavers name is widely associated with Indian communities in both North and South Carolina. Shout out to the Chavers family. Shout out to Anu. All right. Shout out to Anu because he told me about this whole history a long time ago, right? Before I even read it here. I never even read this chapter fully. I never even know he talked about this. So you guys can know, right? The 1800, 1810, 1820, and 1830 census use the free persons of color category for most non-whites, including Indians, okay? Including Indians, free persons of color, including Indians, free persons of color. And again, these whites, again, that could be Indians too and people of color. They just could be status during these times. Thus, the native families of Robinson County, North Carolina, listen to this, the Indians of Robinson County, North Carolina, and all Virginia counties are always classified as colored persons. Man, body bag after body bag after body bag. Shout out to Drop, man. You guys see, this is real history. That's a lot of people. How could this not be talked about more? Why is this not addressed? Why the history is not rewritten? Why aren't people given their right identity back if this is documented? Thus, all the American Indian families of Robinson County and all the Virginia counties, all of Virginia, pay attention, are classified as colored persons. These are Indians. They're classified as colored persons. Paper genocide. They're admitting paper genocide. Are you understanding? Are you taking notes? Are you sharing the video? Are you learning? Are you making a difference knowing this stuff? Are you a teacher? Are you a professor? Are you making a difference? Are you teaching the right thing? Are you helping people get their identity back? Lawyers, judges, right? These census people, takers today that work for the U.S. Census Bureau and all that, right? Are you paying attention? Are you doing something with this information? Are you just hearing me read? The whole Virginia counties, all the Indians in Virginia and Robinson County, North Carolina, basically all over the states were classified as colored persons or Negro or, or white or whatever. Carter Woodson's The Free Negro Heads of Families in the United States in 1830. This book, we've shown a lot. We've read from it a lot. Being an indexing of the free colored population includes many thousands of Indians. This is what we're trying to say to you guys, man. We've read these books. I've shown you the names, and I've told you. You see these names? A lot of these are attached to Indian families. I wasn't kidding, guys. I know for a fact. I know the people, the descendants. They talk to me. I've done their genealogy. I've seen it. They've shown me. They told me their stories. They know who they are. So when I see these names in these book, The Free Negro Heads of Families, I say, hey, guys, this is related to the Catawba, Eastern Sioux, or the Creeks, or whatever. I'm trying to tell you, I know this stuff. Look what it's telling you here. In this book that's supposed to be all about black, so-called black or Negro families, you got thousands of Indian families, thousands of Indians in this book that have been reclassified, that have been called Free Negro Heads of Families. For example, the entire Cherokee Indian population of Carroll County, Georgia, the entire Cherokee, so-called Cherokee, are you sure these ain't Muskogee-speaking people and had different names and clans? Because Georgia, that's not their stronghold. They came there later on, but that wasn't their stronghold. The Tennessee was their stronghold. That was Creek lands in general, so-called Creek, right? But either way, we're not debating that right now. Indians are being reclassified, right? Indians are being reclassified as colored persons. The entire so-called Cherokee Indian population of Carroll County. The entire, guys, the whole county, with names such as Rattlesnake, Ekoa, Wata, Tanekulehi, Wasota, Kisha. Again, Kisha. I told you Kisha, Maya, Kisha. That's Indian words. I told you, widow, swimmer, pumpkin pile, Charles Van, and so on. One also finds people like Stephen Jumper in Rockingham County, North Carolina. Charles Moose in the same county, and Indianville at Westchester County, New York, classified as people of color, along with the general Indian population, in county after county, in county after county after county after county after county after county, guys. Indians being reclassified, paper genocide, real history. It wasn't just Walter Plecker. It's been happening. In 1834, a special census was taken of the Choctaw Indian people, right? The Choctaw or Chata. In it, we find the following revealing entries. Jacob O'Rare, a mulatto, half Indian, half Negro. James Blue, a Negro Indian man, has an Indian wife. William Lightfoot, a mulatto, half Indian, half Negro. Jim Tom, half-breed Negro, has an Indian wife. Jacob Daniel has a half Indian and half Negro for a wife. You guys see? See the hijacks? In the 1840 U.S. Census, the free color category continues to be used for most non-whites. In 1850, U.S. Census enumerators were instructed in enumerating colored persons to write B or M. Listen, now instead of colored, now they're turning them into black. Now they're turning them into black. And M for mulatto, right? The B presumably stood for black and M for mulatto. Okay, now they're becoming black and mulatto. Although mixed seems to be the more correct modern rendering. In both 1850 and 1860, these racial terms were not defined by the census officials. In Virginia, one finds that all the Indians of the central Tidewater counties were classified as M. Okay, pay attention. All the Indians were made mulattoes in the central Tidewater in Virginia, including the residents of the Pamunkey and Mattaponi reservations, with a few exceptions in King William County, where one or two were classified as B, right, as so-called black. We're talking about Indians, paper genocide. The B should be placed in context, since early Virginia tax rolls, such as those of the 1780s, divided all titleable persons between white souls and black souls, right? That's the hijack. The term black or B is therefore open to various interpretations. You see? So in this black included white souls and black souls. You guys see this? The same pattern appears in Norfolk County, Virginia, where many members of the Nansemond Indian group living near Portsmouth were classified as M, right, as mulattoes. So Indians being classed as mulattoes, straight up. This is especially significant since the Nansemonds were categorized as I for Indian on an 1860 local tax roll. So the same people appear as Indian in 1860 and later on, now they're mulattoes. We've seen that happen a lot. At various dates, certificates were apparently issued to Nansemond Indian people, such as the following: William Bass, the bearer, tall, swarthy, so swarthy, so-called black, right? Swarthy, dark eyes, is of English and Indian descent, with no admixture of Negro blood. Numbered as a Nansemond by his own choosing, all right? Body bag for the illusion. You guys see that? He's so-called black, he's swarthy, he's an Indian, and he's English. The whole Nansemond start with this English guy who came as a settler. He was probably most likely a black European and got with a princess, some type of princess, I would say from the Powhatan Confederacy. And through him and her, you get the Nansemond Indians. But it starts with also a European as well. And the Bass last name is brought by him. And he might be a descendant, this William Bass, a son or a grandson of the same person, of the two people I'm talking about. So William Bass is described as swarthy, right? He's European and Indian, but he's black. Does that make sense? The way they show us so-called English and Indians today, if we Google it, it doesn't, right? And this is what I'm trying to tell you guys. There's a whole different history here. When I'm saying black Europeans and black Indians, this is what I'm talking about. So all these people get grouped up eventually as Negroes, right? Now he's mulatto. Now he's being called black in the census. And he has no so-called Negro blood, meaning he's European and Indian, because these Negroes, you know, it's a reclassification of both peoples. This is a big one right here. So he's of English and Indian descent with no admixture of Negro blood, numbered as a Nansemond by his own choosing. He said, I'm an Indian. This was in 1742, all the way back in 1742, all right? So swarthy. But in the following century, many Nansemonds were harassed as mulattoes and listed in the 1850 census with M after their names, okay? Reclassified. Now they're mulattoes, harassed. Nonetheless, a local county court ruled in 1833 that they were not free Negroes or mulattoes, but are of Indian descent. So I know some years passed and finally they fought for their right to be recognized as Indians probably. And now the court is officially saying legally that they're not free Negroes, okay? They're not mulattoes, all right? They're Indians, all right? They're not free Negroes. How can you go from free Negro to Indian to Indian to Negro if it wasn't the same people, right? Just because you change on paper. Think about this. I had to explain this to the AI literally yesterday. Just because people are changed on paper doesn't mean they're going to change physically, right? Think about that. Here we have a clear indication that some whites, so-called, were still using the term mulatto. For people with no African ancestry. No African ancestry. We're talking about Indians, pure Indians, or Indians mixed with Europeans, right? And they're being classed as mulattoes. They're being called free Negroes or free people of color or colored people, right? So-called black. Even in the 19th century, while the judiciary was holding to the letter of Virginia's 1785 law requiring Negro ancestry. Ha! All in all, some 37% of the free people of color in 1850 were classified as M, mulatto. All the people, no matter what shade of complexion they were, right? Because it wasn't about color. No matter, all free people, 37% were classed as mulatto. Well, not all, but 30%, a lot. While only about 1/12 of the slaves were so categorized. It seems clear that a good many of the free people classed as M or mulattoes were in fact Indians or of Indian descent. It is helpful at this point to review a few specific cases so as to shed light on actual practice. An interesting one is that of the Dungy family. The name appears to originate in King William County, Virginia, as it is found nowhere else in the 1790 U.S. Census or in the Virginia tax rolls of 1782 to 1785, examined by this writer. In 1782, a Joseph and John Dungy are recorded as white titleables in King William. In 1783, John Dungaree is age 21, plus has 4 white souls in his household and no Negro slaves. So remember, Dr. Hijack with the reclassification is making a point. In 1810, John Dungy is still listed as a white titleable. By that day, Dungies had also appeared in other Virginia counties. All are listed in the census as free colored. See, so the same family, the same people, on one place they're white titleables or white souls, and another place they're free colored. You see how they play around with that, right? Except for one woman in Middlesex class as white. And the situation is similar in 1820. On the tax rolls of King William County, after 1813, the Dungies are all listed as mulattoes. They all became mulattoes eventually. John Dungy specifically appears as a mulatto on the King and Queen County tax rolls for 1813. In 1825, an interesting document was submitted to the General Assembly of Virginia. Your petitioners, John Dungy and Lucy Ann, his wife, who are free persons of color residing in King William County. So the Dungies, these are Indians, but they're being called free persons of color. In King William County, ask permission respectfully to represent to the Senate and House of Delegates of Virginia that your petitioner John, who is descended from the aborigines of this dominion, from the aborigines, from the indigenous people, was born free, all right? And they call him a free person of color, right? Lucy Ann Littlepage, his wife, was an emancipated slave. It says half Negro and half white, supposedly, right? So half Negro don't mean African, and half white, huh? Sounds like an Indian that mix might be with a European. Could be a black European, you know? So again, slave and white and all that doesn't indicate origin. The daughter of a wealthy planter. So that's her father. That's her father, huh? The daughter of a wealthy planter. That's her dad. It's all family. This is what I'm saying. It's not the evil slave master. They therefore had to petition to remain in Virginia since she was required by law to leave the state. Respected so-called white planters endorsed the petition by stating that, or European planters endorsed the petition by stating that Captain Dungy is a freeborn native of Virginia, was raised in the calling of a sailor, and has for many years been the commander of a vessel constantly employed in the navigation of the Chesapeake Bay and the rivers of Virginia. By 1830, Dungies had spread to Tennessee, right, Cherokee, right land, South Carolina, Ohio, New York, and various parts of Virginia. Those in Virginia and Tennessee were all classified as free persons of color. In 1840, the same is true. In 1850, all of the Dungies in King William County, Virginia were classified as either mulattoes or black. Again, these are Indians, right? And even though all were living on or near the Mattaponi or Pamunkey Indian reservations, they didn't care about that. Their families next to them. A similar situation exists in relation to other prominent Indian families. The Sampson family contributed a great many students to the Indian College at William and Mary. So Thomas 1754, John 1764, George 1769, 1775 Reuben, 1775 Edmund, and 1776, right? An 1812 petition of the Pamunkey tribes lists John, William, and Henry Sampson as among the headmen and chiefs, right? Pamunkey Indians right here. Prominent Indian family. It would appear that during that period, many Sampsons left to settle elsewhere, where they were in 1810 and later classified as free people of color. Paper genocide. They relocated. Now they're in a different place. Now they're being judged based on their looks, not who they are. Now they're free people of color. They're Pamunkey Indians. Why is all these Indians being called free people of color if they weren't so-called black? The 1850 census for King William County classifies all of the Sampsons, all on the Pamunkey reservation, as mulattoes. And they're inside the reservation, right? Now they're mulattoes, but they don't want to classify them as Indians, including Thomas. In 1865, Thomas Sampson was re-elected a headman at Pamunkey, and he's being called a mulatto now. The same thing is true for the Langston family at Pamunkey, a family which contributed students to the Indian school at William and Mary College before the Revolutionary War. In 1830 and 1840, their descendants are classified as free-colored. Now they're free-colored. Now they're Negroes. Now they're black. Now they're African-American, right? And in the 1850, as mulattoes, without exception, okay? Without exception. You gotta call them mulattoes. Paper genocide, like Walter Pleasant back in the 1850s. The same is true for all of the prominent Pamunkey and Mattaponi families, even including those of Rhoda Arnold and Molly Holt, two ladies from whom a visitor acquired some Indian words in 1844. Many photographs of Indian people in central Tidewater, Virginia were taken by anthropologists in the 1890s to 1920s. These photographs illustrate rather clearly that the people being described in the records as mulattoes are of complex racial origin, with Native American features predominating. But they look like Indians to me. Another interesting case is afforded by the Nottoway tribe, a reservation group in Southampton County, Virginia. In 1808, a partial census of the tribe identified, for example, Littleton Scholar, age 51, as an Indian, full blood. So in 1808, he's an Indian full blood with a white wife, supposedly, maybe European. Maybe she's just an Indian that passes for white, a black person that passes for white. She's classed as white because of her status, and many things. In the 1830 U.S. Census, however, Littleton's sons, Billy and Ned, are listed as free people of color. So now his sons are free people of color. And check it out, does that make sense? Because he's supposed to be full-blood Indian, right? And full-blood Indians are supposed to look a whole different way. They're not supposed to be black, right? Supposedly, right? We just set an example here. And then his wife is supposed to be white, so that would be what they show you on Google as an Indian, Native American, right? And then you Google white and you combine that. Would you get offspring free people of color? No, right? Not based on what they tell us Indian and white is supposed to be. But when you know that possibly both these people describe of colored folks that are just being called, one Indian, the other one white, and then the kids are free people of color. Come on now, look at this, guys. That's crazy. That's crazy. Their own kids are something else, right? And then all of the surviving full-blood Nottoways are listed in the same manner. So all the descendants of all the Nottoways, same thing happened to them. They turn into free people of color. Paper genocide all over the place, guys. Reclassification. Ethnic cleansing. This has happened. This really happened. In 1844, an enumeration of free Negroes and mulattoes in Southampton County listed certain mulatto children, including Alex, Bob, Samuel, and Gideon Scholar, all children of a white mother, supposedly, right? So-called white. Again, that could be just a classification tag. The scholars do not appear to have had any Negro ancestry, but are regarded nonetheless as mulattoes. They only know about them being Indians and possibly Europeans, right? Not so-called black or Negro or Africans, right? But they're still being classed as mulattoes, so that makes sense. You see, it's not about complexion. Most of the other Nottoways with some Negro ancestry are classified as mulattoes or as free Negroes. Another case involves the Scott family of Indians in Richmond, Virginia. The Scott family of Indians, huh? Sounds like Eastern Sioux people right here. Shout out to the Scots, shout out to Anu. Another case involves the Scott family of Indians in Richmond, Virginia. William Scott was listed as an Indian in the tax rolls of the 1780s. By 1810, Billy Scott, same guy, right, was called a free person of color. You see what they did to the Indian? So this is what I'm saying. Unfortunately, we can't go back and find these tax rolls. It's hard to get them to pull up on ancestry.com or familysearch.org when you're building your tree and you're doing your genealogy. So you might have got us back maybe as 1810. All you see is free person of color. Or you're like, hey man, I know this is an Indian. Man, I know this is an Indian. You got a real strong feeling, right? But in this case, you would be right. If this was your ancestor, you would be right. If you see him in 1810 as a free person of color, but in the 1780s he was an Indian. He has been reclassified. Paper genocide. This is literally what's happening in a lot of your trees, guys. So again, by 1810, he was a free person of color with 9 in his household. By 1850, the oldest William Scott in the area, age 49, was classified as M. Now he's mulatto in the census, as was his probable son. All other William Scotts were classed as either black or mulatto in Henrico County, okay? Now they're starting to become black. In 1853, the grand jury charged William Scott Sr., a free Negro, now they're Negroes, right? Indians, right? These are all Indians, right? Remember, for retailing ardent spirits to be drunk at the place were sold without a license. The defendant moved the court to permit him to withdraw his pleas of not guilty. and to plead that he was not a free Negro, huh, but an Indian. I ain't a free Negro, man. I'm an Indian, man. Get it right. The court held that to be immaterial since the charge was the same for whites, Indians, or free Negroes. Oh, man. But unfortunately, he couldn't use that excuse on this one. They didn't care. It don't matter if you're Indian, you're not supposed to do it, man. All right, you can be an Indian all you want, but it's still the law. The William Scott claiming to be an Indian in 1853 was doubtless the same person as the Scott aged 49. You see, the guy who was originally an Indian in tax rolls, then he became a free person of color, then he became mulatto. Now he's fighting to not be listed as free Negro, right? You see how they class this different person in different ways? So at age 49, he was classed as mulatto in the 1850 census, since the latter had property worth $3,000 and could read. Doubtless he owned a store or shop of some kind. Many other examples could be cited, including that of the widespread Gowen or Gowin family, descended probably from Gowen, an Indian servant to Mr. Thomas Bushrod, who was to be free in 1676. That his indenture was over, you see? His contract was over. This Gowen, in turn, may be the child of one Mihil Gowen, Negro laid servant. Now, he's an Indian, but now you're saying his dad is a Negro. Come on, you see? So who's this Negro laid servant? What is his genealogy? Tell me what that is. Show me their sources. Can't try to say it as an African without proof. Who was discharged, right? This supposed Negro. He was discharged from service in 1657 in York County, and who had a son named William, born to a woman belonging to a white lady. So-called white again. The latter gave up all claims on the child, but it is impossible that he was later indentured. It is possible that he was later indentured. I told you. His contract is up. He was indentured. This is not the only example of the interchangeable use of Negro and Indian in Virginia. Interchangeable. Same people being called Indian, then Negro, then mulatto, then black, then Indian again, then free person of color, then colored, you know. By 1754, many of the Gowens had moved to Granville, North Carolina, where Thomas, Michael, and Edward Gowen were all listed as mulatto. Members of a militia company, Gowen or Gowen descendants, are classified as free people of color now, rarely as white. These are all people of color because, they probably, anybody, today see them without knowing, they probably call them so-called black or black Americans, right? African American. In the census through 1840 in Virginia, Tennessee, and North Carolina, all right, they were never classified as white in those censuses. In 1850, they are usually classified as mulatto throughout the South. In 1870, the term mulatto was defined by U.S. Census officials to include quadroons, octoroons, and all persons having any respectable trace of African blood, all right, or Negro blood, right? So we touched the hijack with this whole quadroon, octoroon hijack, this blood quantum, where they're based off a false foundation, thus taking the definition far beyond the legal statutes of any state at that date. Quite clearly, large numbers of people of American Indian ancestry would be included under such a definition, you see? Mad Indians, they're trying to call quadroons and octoroons and all this hijack African, all that. That's what he's literally just said right there. In 1880 and 1900, there were no published instructions. But in 1890, a black was defined, listen, a black, now in all the way almost 1900, now on the hijacks, incubators taking over, Yeah, a black was defined as a person with 3/4 or more black blood. So who's really counting how much blood? Who's doing the percentage of that years in those years? They didn't have no DNA things. That's more modern things, guys. Do you understand what I'm trying to tell you here? Who's really measuring all this stuff? 3/4 are all black blood. Other persons with any proportions of black blood being classified as mulattoes, quadroons, or octoroons. Again, it's all based on appearance. In 1910, black included a full-blooded Negroes, while mulatto included all other persons having some proportion of perceptible trace of Negro blood, oral appearance, physical. All of these definitions, of course, allowed broad scope. Again, that's what happened. And now that it allowed a broad scope to local white census takers and went beyond the statutory definition of mulatto in most states, okay? Now it became the perspective of the census takers. Later census also intended to increase the size of the Negro group by including most persons of mixed Indian, right, or just Indian people of color, right? For example, the 1930 census takers were instructed to count as Indians those of mixed white and Indian ancestry, except where the percentage of Indian blood is very small. Again, how would a census taker know that? How would they know? Do they got the whole person's genealogy? They did some blood tests and all that? They don't. They didn't. So it's all based on their ideas of race, modern concepts, and perspective of what people look like. So how do they know if Indian has a lot of blood or a little bit of blood, or when the person is regarded as a white person where he lives? But this same reasoning was not applied to the American so-called hybrids. Such people shall be returned as Negro. See, unless the Indian blood predominates and the status as an Indian is generally accepted in the community. All right, so there's a bunch of hijacks around you. They're saying, well, he's not an Indian, he's a Negro. Then they're going to go with what everybody else is saying. That makes no sense. But anyways, who's measuring the blood anyway? Quantum. The 1940 census instructions required that an American so-called Negro hybrid be counted as a Negro unless the native ancestry very definitely predominates, and he is universally accepted in the community as an Indian. Thus, although the term mulatto ceases to be used in U.S. censuses, the general tendency is to use the term Negro to include all Indian black persons who earlier would have been categorized under the former term. In short, mulatto had become subsumed completely under Negro. We can be reasonably certain, I would suggest, that in many parts of the country, white census takers would have counted as Negro virtually all Indians showing any color. Basically, they're saying African, they're saying showing any color, except in counties where the Indians openly resisted such a classification. Anywhere where Indian looks so-called black or like a Negro person, they would literally reclassifying them. Except in counties where Indians openly resisted such a classification. It is interesting to note that in the most recent U.S. Census, 1980, the most recent, see, this is from the 80s. This book was written, that's why we're updating the interpretations based on the real research we've done, right, in the last 9 years. It's just persons, so since the last census in his time, 1980, persons of part Indian ancestry had to be very alert if they wish to be counted as an Indian, all right? You got to really know who you are, or else they're going to turn you to a crayon color, is what he's telling you. 1980s. So he did amazing things. This book for his time, he was spilling a lot of beans, man. Census rules forbade a person being counted in more than one racial category, and no mixed status was allowed. Thus, a person who checked more than one box was to be counted only with the first category marked, and white came first, black second, and Indian third. Wow. In short, any person who checked both black and Indian would be counted as black only. Wow. You see the hierarchy of the tags. Aside from census records, there are a few other extra statutory definitions of the term mulatto, which are of interest. Examples will be cited in more or less chronological order. In 1648, an Englishman, Thomas Gage, who had lived in Mexico and Guatemala, wrote a book which made frequent use of the terms mulatto and mestizo, all right, all the way back in 1648, an Englishman in Guatemala. The latter was defined as a Spanish-American mixture, while mulatto is used very frequently but only clarified in this passage. So this is what he was saying back in the 1600s. It says, nay, a blackamoor or tunny young maid, a slave will make heart shift, but she will be in fashion. The attire of this baser sort of people of blackamoors and mulattoes, okay, which are of mixed nature, of Spaniards and blackamoors, okay? Spaniards and blackamoors, huh? Is so light and their carriage so enticing that many Spaniards disdain their wives for them. Their bare black and tawny breasts are covered with boobs, hanging from their chains of pearls. Wow. Boobs or bobs. So that's what they're saying, huh? Back in 1648, so Gage, an ex-Catholic priest, was describing his memory of Mexico City. After the passage of 20 years, and we may suspect that his definition of mulatto is not intended to be precise as to the exact genetic makeup of the part African people. You see, that doesn't mean they're African, he's saying. Because the way he's describing Spaniards and Blackamoors, well, who's the Blackamoor and who's the Spaniard? They could be both people of color. They could both be so-called black, right? Blackamoor could be an Indian. So subsequently, he frequently refers to Indians, mestizos, mulattoes, and blackamoors in Guatemala, Nicaragua, Panama, and elsewhere. But he never introduces any term for African American hybrids, that's the hijack, Negro, or just people of color. They call them Negroes. They so confused because they're Indians, but they're so-called black, so they're calling them hybrids, man. Wow. As such, are we to believe that in such a heavily American region, there were no American or mixed bloods embraced within his mulatto category? In 1673, an Englishman from Virginia visited the Tomahitan Yuchi people living in the west in the Appalachian Mountains. They took him on an expedition to Spanish Florida, to a Negro town, right? A Negro town way back in 1673. They're calling it Negro town. What does that mean? In the Appalachian Mountains, they went to an expedition in Spanish Florida to a Negro town where they killed a Negro man. Later, it was reported the Tomahitans have amongst them many brass pots and kettles from 3 gallons to 30. They have 2 mulatto women, all white and black people they put to death since their 20 men were barbarously handled by Spaniards or hairy people. It seems quite clear that these mulattoes women were neither white nor black. You see, they weren't white or black, but were of mixed race, including American ancestry. They were Indians, since it would make no sense to kill so-called whites and blacks, but keep people who were mixed white and black. A Spanish Indian boy was also spared by the Tomahitans and was brought to Virginia by them. A Spanish Indian boy, huh? Like Europeans and Indians. That's what I'm trying to tell you. In the 1684 to 1699 period, Anne Wall, a so-called white woman, right, European maybe, was convicted in Virginia of having 2 mulattoes bastards by a Negro. This illustrates a tendency found in some records and indicates that the term mulatto could have been applied to children of some other type of father as well. This is borne out by a statement of Helen T. Catterall summarizing records of the 17th century. She states that the servant, but non-slave, class included mulatto servants, whose servitude was the penalty for having a so-called white mother or European mother and an Indian, Negro, or mulatto father. So you see, there could be black European woman who they call him white, and then Indian, Negro, mulatto father. That doesn't show ethnicity. I mean, but the Indian definitely. So if he's an Indian, he's an Indian, right? So that's a law reenacted in 1705 or after 1723 for being descended in the maternal line from such a combination of ancestors. In 1704, a British writer referred directly to an Indian as a mulatto. Directly, straight up, he's just calling this Indian a mulatto, this guy. He writes, "I shall observe your caution," says my mulatto comrade, the Indian, my mulatto comrade, the Indian. In 1706, a girl described as a mulatta or musty became pregnant in Accomack County, Virginia. She would have been punished with servitude, but an Indian, Edward Bagwell, stepped forward to assume all cost. This clearly implies that she was half American, and either of the two terms, mulatto or musty, was to such people. Okay? So it might be half European, half Indian. In 1715, a South Carolina English missionary baptized a mulatto girl whose mother he reported as an Indian. All right, she's an Indian, and whose father he said was a white trader or European. That could be a black European again. During the period 1717 to 1721, an Englishman named Hugh Jones lived in Virginia. In 1724, he published a book in which he stated, "The slave children belong to the master of the woman that bears them, and such as are born of a Negro and a European are called mulattoes." Okay, a Negro and a European. And who's the Negro and who's the European? Let me see what they look like. But such are born of an Indian and Negro are called musties. So an Indian and a Negro, a musty, huh? Could be different types of Indians. Could be Indians mixing with Europeans. Who's the Negro? Some doubt is cast on Jones' accuracy or reliability in that term musty. Seldom appears in any records of Virginia that I have examined. Instead, one finds the following. A reward is offered in 1782 for a runaway slave who, according to the description, was the offspring of an Indian and a negress, but he is called a mulatto. Another example occurred in 1818 when Virginia judges considered a case where a free person was sold as a slave to defraud a buyer. The free man sold was not proved to be either a Negro or mulatto, but by one witness who said he had heard that he was the offspring of a supposed white woman or European by an Indian. European and Indians. That's what they call mulattoes. You see, none of these descriptions are telling you all these examples, guys. I hope you're paying attention. They're being applied so differently, the word mulatto, to people than what we think of mulatto today. All right. This would indicate that as late as 1818, the term mulatto could be applied to a European Indian mixed blood by Virginia jurists, in spite of the evidence cited in the previous section. From 1803 to the Civil War, all free people of color in Virginia were required to register. The register for Essex County has survived, and in it we find many Indian people listed, but none are called Indians. They know they're Indians, right? The people know they're Indians. They know these names, they know these families, they know the history in the area, right? And yet they're being reclassified. They're not being listed as Indian people. Classifications given include black, they're actually being called black or dark brown, tawny, listen, very dark, mulatto, dark mulatto. So this is all the different shades of so-called black folks, right, in America, right? So-called black, dark brown, tawny, very dark mulatto, a very dark mulatto, a dark mulatto, and a shade lighter than a dark mulatto, a bright mulatto, very bright mulatto, and very bright mulatto, almost white. Wow, you see all the shades, copper-colored tribes of America, from the lightest copper to the darkest copper. You see all the different shades, all the different Indians, but they're all people of color now. Now they're all black. Now they're all African Americans now today. One man, the son of a non-white father of an Indian extraction, judging from his family name, and a European mother, was described in 1844 as color bright mulatto, with hair somewhat like a white person's. His brother, a son of the same white man, so we're in the 1800s, so these could be literally pale-skinned people, was described as a bright mulatto with long hair. No doubt the hair was being worn long because of Indian identity, since this was a common for American Indians in Virginia through the 1890s at least. It should be noted that all of the persons with Indian family names registered in Essex, okay, pay attention, with the exception of one woman and her children, were born free. They were born free. All the Indian families. In Delaware in 1850, several legal cases developed when laws designed to control free Negroes and mulattoes were applied to Indian communities in that state. One set of cases was designed to prevent certain Indians of Sussex County from buying or selling arms and ammunition. The Indians were found to be mixed with some vague degree of Negro ancestry, right, or of color. They have color, right? That's all they know. They're basing it off their color, and therefore legally mulatto. Similarly, a relative of one of the above Indians, Peter B. Slocum, was arrested for having entered the state since the revised code prohibited entry by free Negroes and free mulattoes. Wow. They can't even come back to their own land where they used to walk around freely, their ancestors, right? He was fined and jailed, but the judgment was reversed in 1856 because he had been a resident at the time the act had been passed. He was a resident there. Come on now. One more example will be given to show that the term mulatto was regularly used to include persons of part Indian ancestry. In North Carolina in the 1870s, a European woman wrote a book about the people now known as the Lumbee Indians of Robinson County. The author traces the ancestry of many Lumbees and takes note of so-called white and Indians as well as Negro ancestry, right? People of color. Nonetheless, all are referred to as bright mulattoes, light mulattoes, or simply as mulattoes. She knows that the area of their settlement was called Scuffletown from the act of the mulattoes inhabiting the region, congregating in Lowry's grocery, and after imbibing pretty freely of whiskey and engaging in the broad shuffle, and also from the fact that it was generally a scuffle with the mulattoes to live. She describes a Lumbee resistant leader, Henry Berry Lowry. The Lowrys, right? We got videos on this. Did a genealogy. You got my friend Lowry and his genealogy. You guys remember? And we did a video on the Lowry families and how they were reclassified as basically, black from Indians. This is probably the example they're going to talk about right now. It says Henry Berry Lowry as follows. His color was of mixed white and yellow, partaking of an admixture resembling copper. See? That's what they call in white and yellow, copper. You see that? I told you copper has many shades, guys. It's not just one shade of copper. It goes from the darkest copper, right, to the lightest copper. Copper-colored tribes of America includes all the shades. Again, Indian color, however, still predominating. So it's copper, but the Indian color, however, still predominating. That's the copper, although the white and black remain apparent. That's the hijack. That's crayon colors. He wore a dark goatee. His hair was straight and black like an Indian's. Nonetheless, he was a mulatto to white North Carolinians of 1875, even as his people recorded as mulattoes in the U.S. Census. In the same year, there is testimony from the Robinson County attorney before a congressional committee in which he says that the mulattoes of Robinson, as he termed the Lumbees, were of a mixture of Cherokee and Portuguese. They're Sephardic Jew heritage too. They mixed with Sephardic Jews and so-called Cherokees. What's a Cherokee, man? Show me who you talking about, man. But they're Indians and Sephardic Jews, huh? Indians and Sephardic Jews, man. That's what I've been trying to tell you, man. The use of the term Portuguese may have been a euphemism for African. No, they actually meant the Sephardic Jews who were so-called black. I don't know why they're trying to make the Portuguese African here, but I do tell you that they're talking about black Portuguese, literally admitting it. But nonetheless, it seems clear that the term mulatto was still being used in a very broad way. The situation historically in North Carolina, tax records, and other document is summarized by Robert K. Thomas as follows. For the Lumbee people, most individuals are listed most commonly as mulattoes. In that time in North Carolina, the legal category mulatto meant having one white parent and one non-white parent. Start to hijack. The non-white parent could be either Indian or Negro. Same thing. Some individuals in these families are listed as white. A few are listed as black, and occasionally an individual is listed as an Indian. This meant full-blood Indian. By definition, a mixed-blood Indian would be a mulatto. So you see all their hijacks. They're trying to interpret all this. They're literally admitting it's the same family members, but they're all being listed differently. Right? They're literally admitting that. A similar situation existed in Tennessee, where the so-called Melungeon people, who were actually probably Saponi and Powhatan people, huh? Those two different tribes right there. Saponi are Eastern Siouan, the Powhatan, like I believe they're more related to Algonquins and stuff. But Saponi and Powhatan is what they call a Melungeon in this part, right? Melungeon is another word we got to break down and not just generalize with as well, you see? So they're probably Saponi or Powhatan of Hawkins, Granger, or Granger, and nearby counties were often classed as free-colored. The Saponi Indians and the Powhatans were classified as free-colored. You guys hear that? And mulatto, but occasionally also as white. You see, even as white. A white writer of 1890 asserted of these people, a great many declared them mulattoes, and based their belief upon the ground that at the close of the Civil War, Negroes and Melungeons stood upon precisely the same social footing, free men of color. All. One official said that the Melungeon isn't a N-word. You see that? The N-word, a Negro, and he isn't an Indian, and he isn't a white man. The author adds, in appearance they bear a striking resemblance to the Cherokees, and they are believed by the people around about to be a kind of half-breed Indian. Their complexion is reddish-brown. Totally unlike the mulatto. Reddish-brown, huh? Reddish-brown, huh? Copper-colored. Here, of course, we sense that the writer of 1890 has a feeling that the term mulatto ought not to be applied to persons whose shade of brownness and probably other features do not resemble those of an African white hybrid. That's the hijack. That's the nonsense right there applied. Negro white hybrid. A black white hybrid, basically what they're saying. This same confusion over the use of the term mulatto is exemplified by the status of a similar group of mixed Indian people in South Carolina called variously brass ankles, red bones, yellow people, and so on, until recently. Although frequently classified as mulattoes, in earlier census records, these people in the 1940s were being variously called mulattoes. Yellow people, half N-words, you see that, half N-words, or Negroes, and half Indians, by local whites. Some were being accepted as whites also, albeit with reluctance. The term musty or mestizo had reportedly disappeared from the local usage. All right? So we all the way in this section of the book now is going to actually talk about runaway slave advertisements, which we've shown. I have a video on these, you know. And this is a really cool part of the book. And you guys are going to see how the people are described, you know. Who's in the runaway? Who's really the slaves? It says advertisements for runaway slaves occasionally contain information which sheds light on racial terms. The term mulatto is sometimes used for persons whose background cannot be documented, but very often American ancestry is specifically indicated. Indian, right? In the following examples from Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, references to Americans held as slaves will also be included, along with those specifically using the term mulatto. We shall begin with Virginia. When they say Americans, they mean Indians. 1737, 1738, Amos, a mulatto man slave. He's about 6 feet high with broad face and shoulders, has bushy hair, and is a native of this country. Although he has the countenance of a Madagascar. He's an Indian of the American, right? Of the American, United States, right? But of North America. Indigenous person, but he looks like an indigenous Madagascar. You see, true old world. But he has bushy hair, huh? Mulatto man slave. He's a runaway, huh? You see? 1752, ran away from Somerset County, Maryland. A tall, slim, mulatto man slave. Looks much like unto an Indian, and will endeavor to pass for such, had with him a stripped Indian match coat. Hey, man, he looks just like an Indian, man, and he's gonna pass for one, man. He is an Indian. 1772, ran away, a dark mulatto. Dark mulatto man, slave named Manuel, about 5 feet 9 inches high, 30 years of age, and has bushy hair, okay? He has been used to go by water, has much the appearance of a sailor, and is a tolerably good shoemaker. He was born in the Spanish West Indies, speaks Spanish fluently, all right? He's most likely an Indian, huh? Spanish West Indians, huh? You see, guys, what they're showing you here? What African says 1772 ran away from Cumberland, a mulatto man named Jim, who is a slave, but pretends to have a right to his freedom. His father was an Indian of the name of Cheshire, and very likely will call himself James Cheshire or Shink. He has long black hair resembling an Indian's, okay? All these so-called black people, right? They're all Indians running away. You see this? 1773. Ran away with a Negro fellow named Fortune, a wench named Aminta. Has about the look of an Indian, and is so, her mother having been brought from the Spanish Main to Rhode Island. Has long black hair. They were brought from Rhode Island, okay? They're from the Spanish Main, huh? From maybe Central America or South America. And they were brought to Rhode Island, and they're Indians, okay? The look of an Indian. You see these advertisement, guys? Continuing, it says 1773 ran away from Amelia County, a Negro man of the name of Tom, of a yellowish complexion, a Negro with yellowish complexion. Come on. Much the appearance of an Indian. And he looks like an Indian. His hair is of a different kind from that of a Negro's, rather more of the Indians, but partaking of both. Kind of in between, he just has his hair straightened out probably, which though short, he frequently ties behind. All right, a Negro with a yellowish complexion who looks like an Indian. All right, put it together, man. 1775, ran away from Cumberland, a mulatto man, slave Sancho. Absconded with him a white servant woman. I expect they will change their names and endeavor to pass for husband and wife as free people. Okay, mulatto man, huh? 1775, ran away from Butte County, North Carolina, a slave named Charles, of the Indian breed. Of the Indian breed. A slave named Charles of the Indian breed. 1776, ran away from Amherst County, a Negro fellow named Ben. He used the name John Savage on a previous flight and has an Indian woman for his wife who some time ago lived in Bushland. All right. His wife's an Indian. He's probably an Indian too, Mr. Negro fellow. Because if he's not an Indian, we can't just say African either. Most likely he's a black European. Those were the slaves, American Indians and undesirable Europeans. Continuing, 1777, ran away from Blandfield in Essex County, a Negro man named John Twopence, 40 years of age, of a yellowish complexion, okay? A Negro man with a yellowish complexion. A good countenance. Twopence people were later regarded as Indians in neighboring King William County, so he was really an Indian, being called a Negro. You see that? 1777, ran away from Amelia County, a large young mulatto fellow named Sam of the Indian breed. A mulatto of the Indian breed, a large fellow. Sam, huh? I expect he is in James City County as he has a mother who lives there. 1785, ran away from Dinwiddie County and one Joe. He is a dark mulatto. He has bushy head of hair, okay? Bushy hair, dark mulatto. And is of the Indian breed, but he's an Indian. Were you talking about Indians didn't have woolly hair? Bushy, huh? Indian breed, is an excellent sawyer. Plays on the violin, and he even plays the violin. Changed his name to Peter Tony. All right, he gave himself the name Peter Tony. Continue, 1790, ran away from Southampton, a lad about 18 or 19 years of age called Ben Whitehead. He is of the Indian breed, okay? He is of the Indian breed and almost white, right? Look how light skinned he is, almost white, has coarse, straight, or dark brown color, black eyes, is a carpenter. So he has coarse, straight hair, coarse, huh? And of a dark brown color, black eyes, is a carpenter, and he can read. So you see these advertisements, pretty interesting, right? These runaways, huh? They're most likely, most of them Indians, right? It says the above evidence shows not only that Americans were still being held as slaves in Virginia as late as 1790, but that in 1772, 1777, and 1785, the term mulatto was explicitly used for persons of American ancestry, okay? All right. Any questions? You guys see that? In one of the cases, the mulatto was also part, and they're saying part African Negro, or a person known to be or being called Negro. But in other two instances, no Negro or African ancestry is specifically indicated. It's just Indians being called mulattoes, basically. In 1764, a mulatto or mustee slave called Tony ran away from New Bern, North Carolina. He had a long, stiff black hair and greatly the looks and color of an Indian. Okay? An Indian. In 1775, a slave of the Indian blood named Charles, all right, a very light complexion, ran away from Butte County. Again, these people are all being called Negroes too, probably. He had been branded with an R on the cheek, on the right cheek, man. He has branded like they said they did to Africans. That's an Indian they're doing it to. And a T on the left. He had a long, straight black hair. South Carolina newspapers featured numerous advertisements for mustee slaves, usually of American, right? American and other Negro or other Indian or other Black European mixture. The term mulatto seems to have been used less commonly. Nonetheless, a few examples can be found, along with evidence for continued American, right, and other mixtures. But literally could be two Indians mixing interaction of up to the Revolutionary War period. So, more examples, 1738 ran away an Indian man named Peter. An Indian man, not an African. It says deserted, 1740, from the sloop Mayflower, a tall, rough Spanish Indian fellow. Spanish Indian fellow, also a well-said Spanish Negro fellow. A Spanish Negro and a Spanish Indian, huh? Oh, yeah. 1746 ran away a tall, lusty young wench. Can speak good English, Chickasaw, and perhaps French. The Chickasaws having taken her from the French settlements on Mississippi. She fled with her Negro husband. Okay? She's probably an Indian, all right? Her and her husband. 1748 ran away from Cohansey in New Jersey. A very lusty Negro man named Samson, aged about 58 years, and has some mixture of Indian blood in him. He has taken with him a boy named Sam, who was born of an Indian woman. He looks much like an Indian, only his hair. They both talk Indian very well, and it is likely have dressed themselves in an Indian dress and gone towards Carolina. So he walks like an Indian, talks like an Indian, looks like an Indian, hair like an Indian, Indian son Indian, wife Indian. That's an Indian, guys. Come on now. 1749 ran away a slave between a mulatto and a mustee named Peter, and can read currently well, and was to have gone off with Mr. Maxwell's mustee fellow named Abraham. It's supposed he will harbor about Santi, where he has a wife, Petey, where he has many acquaintance, Fort Holes, Saluti, or New Windsor. 1753 ran away a mulatto girl of the Indian breed, okay? A mulatto girl of the Indian breed, man, named Nancy, about 18 or 19 years old, has long black hair. 1761 ran away a mulatto wench named Betty. She is a short and square maid, has short Indian hair, is well known in Charlestown. Okay, short Indian hair. 1762 ran away a stout black Negro man named Crack. Damn, that's his name? Whoa. With him went a free Indian wench, wife to the fellow Crack, who had a child with her about 2 years of age. A white man was also seen in the canoe with them. 1770, a pilot boat taken by Jack, a Negro man brought up in England. A Negro man from England, and Tony, a brown Indian man, a brown-skinned Indian man, who speaks good English and Spanish. So these are all runaways, right? These are supposed to be your Negroes, your Africans running away, and they're not Africans, right? So 1771, Runaway, a young mulatto or musty wench named Mary, well known at Ashley River, where she formerly lived, and was enticed away by her mother. An Indian wench named Sarah, who lives at Stono Plantation. Huh, damn. 1773 ran away a Negro man named Nero and a mulatto or half Indian man named Frank. So he's a mulatto or half Indian. Which one is it? Well made, but about 19 or 20 years old. So aside from illustrating American, African context, that's the hijack, or just American with other Indians or Black Europeans, the advertisements specifically ascribe American ancestry to mulattoes. In 1753, 1771, and 1773, and by inference, in 1761. The girl described as musty or mulatto in 1771 was specifically stated to be the daughter of an American mother, thus implying that if her father was white, she was a mulatto. While if black, she was a musty. Huh. Guys, see what they're saying? So it would appear that in South Carolina, mulatto was used for European American lighter mixed persons, while in Virginia, mulatto was used for both European American and people of color, American Indians who were colored persons, free people of color. In any event, it would seem clear from the foregoing that the term mulatto has been used frequently so as to include persons of American ancestry. Indians, whether they are mixed with anything they're saying is black Europeans, right, or black Indians. Before drawing any, black Indians from other countries of America. Before drawing any conclusions, however, it is necessary to examine a mass of data of a more indirect nature. All right. And yeah, we're still going, guys. I hope you enjoyed the reading so far. It is a long reading, guys. We still got a couple more pages to go. About 10 more pages. We're probably done. That should be quick, right? But we got a lot of drops still coming. I hope you're enjoying. If you're tired, make sure, take your time with it, pause and, watch it another day, or just stick around, And it says here, definitions by inference. As noted earlier, in several places, there is a strong tendency for the English to use the term mulatto in a general sort of sense as to refer to any mixed blood, to any brown person, or to some type of mixed origin. You see, they're not consistent, and it's not always about black or white or just, what they tell us today. So this use is reflected in 1613 when Purchas asked, why then are the Portugal's children and generations white or mulattoes at most? And in 1657, when Ligon refers to a great fat man, his face not so black as to be counted a mulatto. Or as in Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, 1719, my face, the color of it, was really not so mulatta, like as one might expect. Still more interesting is a reference in 1664 to purgatory, which is a device to make men be mulattas, as the Spaniard calls half-Christians. Thus a half-heathen. So now half-heathen will be a mulatto. Listen, half-heathen might be called a mulatto. A usage very much in keeping with colonial attitudes toward both Americans and anybody being called a slave or in servitude or Negro, right? As stated before, the earliest English usage of the term mulatto seems to relate to individuals whose precise ancestry was not known, as stated before many times and as shown. Okay, guys, that's the basically bottom line point. We're going to continue reading, but that's literally I'm just trying to make you understand that. A lot of the time, they don't even know these people's ancestry. They call them mulatto, or who were associated with the Spanish. For example, in 1590 at Puerto Rico, a mulatto named Pedro, who knew everything about our condition, deserted to the Spaniards. And in 1595, one of Sir Francis Drake's pilots was a mulatto who sailed from Plymouth, but who was probably a Canary Islander in origin. Drake was also aided by a mulatto and an Indian on the coast of Jamaica. You see all these Indians and helping the people navigate, During the same general period, Richard Hawkins sailed along the coast of western South America and put in at San Mato Bay in the Ecuador area. In this area, Hawkins states the Spaniards from Guayaquil had established a post, but the Americans, being a people of stomach and presumption, they suffered themselves to be persuaded and led by a mulatto. Huh. This leader, many years before, had fled unto them from the Spaniards. With the mulatto's help, the Americans forced the Spaniards to retreat to Quito, the nearest Spanish settlement. No doubt, most of the early mulattoes mentioned by the English were American mixed bloods, either with other American Indians, who they classified as Negroes, right? That's who they call Africans, remember, or Black Europeans. So this, however, is not the case with Andrew Batel's use of the term for Portuguese Negro children, or Black Portuguese, right? Born in the Congo. Oh, okay, that they actually do mean Portuguese mixing with Africans, because they're talking about in the Congo region of Africa. So it's not the same in Batel's use of the term, right? When Portuguese and African children born in the Congo mentioned in a work published in the 1613-1625 period. In 1632, the London Company wrote Captain Daniel Elfrey, condemning his indiscretion in too freely entertaining a mulatto, as you call him, in the island Providence Island. In the island where? Providence Island. That's where they send the Pequots. That's where they send the Pequot slaves, to Providence Island. Yeah, and they called them cannibal Negroes. So you see, who's this mulatto that they're talking about? Huh? You know, I'm not making this up. I got videos on this. I've shown the primary sources. These were the Pequots. So that might be one of them. And in taking a Spanish frigate. So he took over a ship too, this mulatto. And in 1666, the Virginia House of Burgesses recorded that a mulatto named Manuel was freed the previous year after being judged, no slave, and sent to serve as other Christian servants do. Just like the white, right? Just like the Europeans, so-called Christians, indentured. In 1658, a London merchant went to Chelsea College to see if any prisoners there had lived as slaves and servants in the Indies and would be willing to go to Virginia. 2 mulattoes offered to go rather than remain eternally in prison. And in 1678, a Spanish mulatto by name Antonio was sold by a Bostonian for 10 years' service in Virginia. A Spanish mulatto named Antonio, huh? I wonder if this is the same one we think it is. This rather general imprecise use of the term continued. 2 more specific examples will suffice. In 1724, the Boston Gazette reported that the crew of a Spanish pirate ship off of Virginia, pirates, right? Sephardic cryptos, right? Of Virginia consists of about 60 Spaniards. A pirate ship, huh? Including the Negroes and mulattoes. 14 English and 18 French. They're all the pirates. They're all mixed together, right? Who's the Spaniards? You didn't say what color they are, right? Who's the Negroes? That could be Indians. Mulattoes, that could be anybody. English, that can include black folks, French as well. So this is what I'm trying to tell you guys. You got to have this reference when reading these things. So in 1728, an English party surveying the Virginia-North Carolina border reported, "We came upon a family of mulattoes that called themselves free. Though by the shyness of the master of the house, their freedom seemed a little doubtful. It is certain many slaves shelter in this obscure part of the world. An even more explicit example of the usage is also from Virginia. In 1670, a law was adopted which confirmed the practice that all slaves converted to Christianity before coming to Virginia served for only a fixed term as servants. All right, they had a contract. They weren't slaves for life. That's your real slavery, guys. People got stuck in these indentures and contracts. That's what became chattel. So in 1682, this act was changed because many Negroes, Moors, mulattoes, and others, you see how they're separating Negroes and Moors? Do you guys peep that? And mulattoes and others born in a heathen country and of heathen parents, but converted to Christianity, elsewhere had been avoiding full slave status. So that was a way to free yourself. If you had converted to Christianity, you can, get out of your indenture. You don't have to be a slave or a servant. And again, that included Moors. So that means a crypto Moor, a Muslim Moor that's pretending to be a Christian, a new Christian, a converso, a Morisco, and everybody else, so-called Negroes, mulattoes. So quite clearly, the mulattoes, now to be made life slaves, were persons born in a non-Christian land to non-Christian parents, that is, American Indians, could be Black Europeans, Asians, and so on. Thus, their precise ancestry could not be known. It could not be known, so that's why I don't include the African. Another body of data which needs to be cited, consist, and review and list of racial groups, usually in statutes, which serve to show that the term mulatto embraced people of American ancestry. The first colonies to be sampled will be those where the term musty is never used in the statutes, beginning with Virginia. So 1657 and 1658, Negroes and Indians, okay? Negroes and Indians, they're grouped together. 1670, Negro or Indian. 1672, Negro, mulatto, Indian slave or servant for life, apprehension of runaways. 1680, Negro or other slave. All Negro and mulatto children, hideable at age 16. Indian women and age 16 up, added in 1682. 1682, Negroes, Moors, mulattoes, or Indians. This is how it starts changing, right? Except Turks and Moors in amity. The treaties, huh? Negroes, Moors, mulattoes, and other Negroes, Moor, or mulatto. In 1691, Negroes, mulattoes, and other slaves, or slaves, Negroes, mulattoes, and Indians, Negro, mulatto, or Indian, Negro, or mulatto. Negro or mulatto cannot be set free unless transported. 1705, then you got Popish recusants, convict Negroes, mulattoes, and Indian servants and others not being Christians. No Negroes, mulattoes, or Indians, although Christians, Jews, or Moors, Mahometans, or other infidels. No cryptos, man. You see this? Negro, mulatto, or Indian, Jew, Moor, Mahometan, or other infidel, Negro or mulatto, Negro, mulatto, or Indian. Also, definition of a mulatto given includes child of an Indian. 1723, free Negro, mulatto, or Indian slaves. 1732, free Negroes, mulattoes, or Indians, Negroes, mulattoes, and Indians, that no Negro, mulatto, or Indian slave shall be set free. You guys hearing that? Mulatto or Indian women, that no free Negro, mulatto, or Indian whatsoever shall hereafter have any vote. Disfranchisement. 1732, Negroes, mulattoes, and Indians. Negroes, mulattoes, and Indians cannot be witnessed except in capital slave trials. 1744, any free Negro, mulatto, or Indian can be a witness in non-white cases. For the better government. 1748, for the better government of Negroes, mulattoes, and Indians, bond or free, reenacted in 1753. 1769, free Negroes, mulattoes, and Indian women, or the wives of free Negroes, mulattoes, and Indians, except slaves. 1777, Negroes and mulattoes. 1779, Negro or mulatto, servant or slave. And then from 1792 to 1812, free Negroes and mulattoes, no Indians listed as such. All right, that's a lot, right? It says one can see that from 1682 through 1769, the usual pattern was to mention three groups: Negroes, mulattoes, and Indians. You see all these people getting grouped together, right? That doesn't show you origin or ethnicity. Well, the Indian part definitely, but who's the Negroes and mulattoes? So in most cases, we are dealing with limitations being placed on the civil and property rights of such people, and therefore, we must assume that it was always the intention of the government of Virginia to subject, the American and any mixed bloods, and probably European American mixed bloods, if of one half-blood, native blood, to the same prescriptions as were imposed on Europeans and Negro hybrids, right? Or whatever that Negro is. He could be another Black European, could be an Indian. The term mulatto is clearly a catch-all to cover all mixed people of whatever variety. Fortunately, in the case of Virginia, this interpretation is confirmed by the statute of 1705. Maryland sources have the following. 1692, Negroes or other slaves, marriage outlawed with whites. 1715, any Negroes or mulatto slaves cannot marry whites. Whites a lot of times just meant Christian people, guys. So 1717, no Negro or mulatto slave, free Negro, or mulatto born of a white woman, or any Indian slave or free Indian can testify where any Christian white is involved. Negroes or mulattoes except mulattoes born in white women. 1728, free mulatto women, Negroes and other slaves and free Negro women. 1846 to 1847 repeats the term in statute of 1717, including Negro, mulatto, Indian, slave, free Indian, etc. Otherwise, 1803 to 1860, free Negro and Negro used almost exclusively. It should be noted that a number of Indian or part Indian communities survived in Maryland. Many are called mulattoes. All right, look at all this history, guys. In the 1790 census, so all these people in the 1790 census and this part of Maryland, they're all Indians. They're being called mulattoes. In Delaware, there are these references. 1721, Negro or mulatto slave, mulatto children by white mothers, Negro or mulatto women, no fornication by white men. So that was in 1739. Free Negroes children to be bound out. 1760, children of white women by Negro or mulatto fathers, and free Negroes to be protected from enslavement. 1767, free Negroes and mulattoes are bad example to slaves. What? 1776, Negro, Indian or mulatto slave. 1787 to 1852, Negro and mulatto used exclusively except for colored persons in 1826. They're letting you know how they're calling these people, the reclassification, paper genocide before, when they call them Negro and mulattoes, Negro and mulatto, Negro and mulatto and Indian. See how they're grouping all these people together all these years until they started calling people colored persons or free colored persons. In 1826, so in 1866, free Negroes and free mulattoes to be punished the same as white persons. Several Indian communities survived in Delaware. They seem to be called mulattoes or colored people. Okay? Colored people in Delaware. So Massachusetts sources offer the following quotations. So 1652, all Scotchmen, Negroes, and Indians. Wow. They're grouping the Scotchmen with the Negroes and the Indians. Wow. They put in specific laws and including the Scotchmen with the Negroes and the Scotchmen, huh? Black Scotchmen, 1600s, huh? Black Europeans, Black Highlanders, who we talking about? 1656, Negroes or Indians. 1669 and 1776, slave statutes referred to all slaves or Negroes or other slaves. 1692, Negro, Indian, or mulatto cannot marry whites. 1694, Negroes, mulattoes, and Indian servants. 1695, Negroes, mulattoes, and Indian servants. 1698, Indian, mulatto, or Negro servant or slave. 1703, mulatto or Negro slaves, Indians, mulattoes, and Negroes. 1705, Negro and mulatto. Negro or mulatto, Negro or mulatto. 1786, Negro, Indian, or mulatto cannot marry whites. Maine continued the style of Massachusetts, 1821, Negro, Indian, or mulatto cannot marry whites. Connecticut uses these terms, 1650, Indians and Negroes. 1660, Indian or Negroes. It's all the same, huh? 1677, Runaway Indians. 1708, Negro and mulatto servants and slaves. 1711, Negro, mulatto, and Spanish Indians servants. 1715, Indians and other slaves. 1723, Negro and Indian servants and slaves. 1730, Negro, Indian, and mulatto slaves. 1769, Indian, Negro, or mulatto slave. 1774, Indian, Negro, or mulatto slave. 1784, free Negroes. Indian, Negro, or mulatto slave. Negro or mulatto child. 1788, free Negro. Indian or mulatto. Such Negroes or mulattoes. 1797, Negro or mulatto child. Any Indian, Negro, or mulatto slave. Rhode Island usages 1712, Negroes or Indian slaves. 1715, Indian slaves. 1728, mulatto or Negro slaves. 1750, Indian Negro or mulatto servants or slaves. 1766, Indian slaves, reprint of 1715. 1770, free Negroes and mulattoes. 1784, Negroes and mulattoes and others. And New Hampshire, as you guys see, it's the same thing, Indian Negroes, so on and so on. Pennsylvania, records list servants or Negroes, etc. 1700s, Indian slaves not to be imported after 1706. 1711, Indians and Negroes, prohibitory duty, and so on and so on. You see 1725, free Negroes, idle people, no free Negro, mulatto, and so on and so on. It says finally there are a couple of references from Kentucky. It says 1798, Negro, mulatto, or Indian. Boundary is the same thing, Negroes and mulattoes and Indians. 1799, you see. Indiana, 1817, no Negro, mulatto, or Indian can be witnessed in white cases. It's all the same, grouping all the people in the same groups on every state, guys. You see that? The above examples are duplicated by ones from other states, and together they should illustrate the thesis that the term mulatto can only be interpreted as referring to mixed persons with American Indian ancestry, being a potential part of the mixture, a potential large part of the mixture, especially during the periods when Indians are identified as being servants or slaves. Okay, it is apparent that no other terms such as half-breed or musty are utilized. Mulatto is therefore the only legal reference to racially mixed persons of whatever background. At this point, it would be well to note other evidence showing that the mixed, American people in Massachusetts, a rather numerous group, were consistently referred to as mulattoes or as people of color. Paul Cuffey, the noted half Indian, remember half black, what does that mean? His dad's supposed to be a Negro man, his mom the Indian, but his man was of color as well. And his dad, nobody knows where he's from. Doesn't mean he was African. So that could be an Indian, that could be a black European, a mariner and a merchant. He could be a Portuguese Sephardic Jew. Referred to himself and his relations and petitions as our color. Indian men, and all free Negroes and mulattoes. Similarly, Crispus Attucks, right? The guy from the American Revolution, the first martyr who they killed in the, after they did the rebellion, they threw the tea over and then they came and killed him and his boys, right? Well, they shot him. So similarly, Crispus Attucks, he was an Indian, right? But they portray him as a black man in history who died in the Boston Massacre. That's what I was trying to say. In the Boston Massacre, was Native American or American Indian, right? Extraction, but called a mulatto. He is usually described as mulatto, but it seems probably that he was a native Indian from Framingham, who was also Negro blood, No, he was just a black Indian. What does that Negro blood mean, right? You can't say African because they haven't even proven that part yet. So it says in 1847, reports stated that most of the Indians of Massachusetts are of mixed blood, and a lot of times they're just saying that based on the color, guys. They might not even be. They might be all mixed with cousins and other Indians and stuff, and some black Europeans here and there. Mostly Indian, right, and black European, like I just said. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, Massachusetts reports make reference to three classes of people in Indian communities: Indians, mulattoes, and Negroes, or later Indians and people of color. But Indians were people of color, so see how it's all the same? In 1767, reports stated that at Mashpee there were various wigwams and shingled houses belonging to and inhabited by Indians and mulattoes. It would seem that the term mulatto was used for white Indian mixed bloods as well as for darker Indian hybrids, they're saying, or dark-colored Indians. In 1802, report notes that the inhabitants of Mashpee are denominated Indians, but very few of the pure race are left. That's the hijack. There are Negroes, mulattoes, and Germans. Like Germans, huh? The 1808 census counted 357 Indians, Negroes, and mulattoes there. Now we should look at the colonies using the term musty in official statutes, since they present a slightly more complex problem. In essence, four racial terms, Indian, Negro, mulatto, musty, are used in situations where six groups existed, right? And we gotta dodge the hijack with this, Americans and black Europeans. What other groups? The problem then is to decide which of the four mixed groups are represented under which of the two terms available for mixed people. So that's what I'm saying. When you have, like, in general, really two options in general, then you narrow it down even more, right? That's what I've been trying to tell you guys. The problem then is to just have, narrow it down, available for mixed people. As noted earlier, the meaning of the term musty will be analyzed separately, but my interpretation is, in essence, that mulatto means primarily, he's saying mulatto is Black Europeans or European American, right? That's what he's saying. And musty primarily, whatever he thinks Negro is, he's saying African, but Negro could be Indian. So basically Indian. Musty sounds like more of Indian. But by the 1790s, musty also referred to an African European American hybrid yellowish like character. All right, that's the hijack. Yeah. So South Carolina uses the following terms: Negro or Indian slaves. That's in 1690, 1703, duties on Negro slaves imported and Indian slaves exported. 1712, an act for the better ordering of Negroes and slaves refers first to Negroes and other slaves and then repeatedly to Negroes, mulattoes, mestizos, and Indians, all of whom have been sold are slaves. Any Negro or Indian slave or any other slave can be baptized but is not free. Wow. 1716, only white men and no other can vote. 1718, will all my slaves, whether Negroes, Indian, and musties, or mulattoes. All right. So again, remember, when they're saying white, they don't mean pale skin, guys. They're talking about status as well. Just like Negroes, Indian, musties, mulattoes, that's all status too. For tax purposes, all musties and mulattoes slaves who are not pure Indian are to be counted as Negroes. You see, they're reclassifying people. 1720, such Negroes, mulattoes, musties, and Indian slaves from militia service. Any Negro, mulatto, musty, Indian slave repeated of 1712. Spanish Indians, musties, Negroes, and mulattoes. 1735, said Negro, Indian, mulatto, mestizo, and so on and so on. So 1740, all Negroes, Indians, free Indians, and amity, and Negroes, mulattoes, or mestizos who are now free, accepted. Mulattoes or mestizos, and all their issue are absolute slaves, and shall follow the condition of the mother. Every Negro, Indian, mulatto, mestizo is a slave unless the contrary can be made to appear. But Indians and amity expected. All right. As you guys see more, 1741 Spanish force includes 800 men, whites, musties, and Negroes, and 200 Indians referred to 1706 event. 1751 treaty with Cherokee Nation. If any Negro or mulatto shall desert, the Indians shall apprehend him, and no trader shall carry into the Indian country any Negro or other slave. 1768, the battle fought in South Carolina with a numerous collection of outcast mulattoes, musties, and free Negroes. All right, so where's the Africans? 1784, Charleston swarms with blacks, mulattoes, and mestizos. There are here many free Negroes and mulattoes. You see how it changes everything when you know these are all hijacked terms, right? Who are they talking about? 1789, tax imposed on all Negroes, mestizos, and mulattoes. 1792, slaves or Negroes, mulattoes, Indians, Moors, or mestizos bound for a term of years. Entry prohibited. 1800, unlawful for any free Negro, mulatto, or mestizo to enter, also applies to other persons of color. 1922, all the way now in the 1900s, right? Unlawful for whites to marry an Indian, Negro, mulatto, mestizo, or half-breed. Wow, in the 1920s, you couldn't marry an Indian if you were so-called white or deemed white. It is quite clear that mestizo class remained legally significant in South Carolina for a considerable period, while the pure Indian group is treated somewhat separately after about 1750, when the colonial authorities began to see the Creeks, Cherokees, and so on as important pawns in the political economic struggle with Virginia, the French, and the northern pro-French tribes. Likewise, most settlement Indians were by then viewed as useful allies and or as having become mestizos or mulattoes. They've all been reclassified, man. North Carolina records have the following. So now this is North Carolina 69, taxable are every white male age 16 and every slave, Negro, mulatto, or Indian. 1705, Negro, Indian, and mulatto slaves sold in Chowan County. 1715, fine for a white person marrying Negroes, mulattoes, or Indians. 1723, act for aid tax on free Negroes, mulattoes, musties, and such persons, as now or hereafter shall be intermarried with any such persons. So it keeps kind of going the same. 1741, fine for white person marrying an Indian, Negro, musty, mulatto, right? Negroes, whatever. 1750, every Negro, mulatto, musty, and every other person mixed blood to the fourth generation, 12 years of age, is titleable. Early act referred to every slave, Negro, mulatto, or Indian, male or female, right? 1777, Indian, Negroes, etc. cannot be witnessed in white cases, just like in the other states. In 1826, all free mulattoes descend from Negro ancestors to the fourth generation inclusive shall be deemed free persons and persons of mixed blood. And it keeps going here, guys. As you guys can see, we can take a screenshot. We go on to New York here, 1684, Indians and Negroes as slaves, right? Who? Indians and Negroes. It might be the same people. Negroes and Indians as slaves. 1688, Negroes and Indians. 1702, every Negro or Indian slave imported, right? And so on and so on. 1706, Negro, Indian, mulatto slaves, all and every Negro, Indian, right? So on and so on. The condition of the mother. 1708, Negro, Indian, and other slaves, right? 1741, Spanish Negroes, Negro, and other slaves. 1768, no squaw, musty, mulatto female shall have any house or cellar or wigwam in Smithtown, New York. Wow. 1788, every Negro, mulatto, musty who is a slave shall continue as such, but the children of every Negro, mulatto, musty woman being a slave shall follow the condition of the mother. Oh yeah, disfranchisement right there. 1806, people of color means mulattoes, musty, husties, etc. All colors from black to white, all colors. All right, people of color is all color from black to white. Okay, people of color, literally, they're telling you in 1806 the law was even black to white. Come on now, even what those you think are white. 1811, certificate of freedom needed by blacks or mulattoes, seek and vote, right, and so on and so on. You guys see. In 1827, an act against kidnapping persons other than Negroes, mulattoes, or musties. And finally, in New Jersey, it says in 1694, Negroes and other slaves, Negroes and Indians, right? The same in every state. The same people getting grouped together. As you guys can see, I have a mental picture here. You can slow it down, take a screenshot. But it's the same thing. The term musty seems to have been introduced very late into New Jersey in spite of much evidence of Indian slavery in the colony. Much evidence of Indian slavery in that colony, right? Not Africans. Do you see the numbers add up, right? The real history. Finally, we may note that the Federal Act of 1807 prohibiting the general importation of slaves refers repeatedly to any Negro, mulatto, or person of color. You see, they didn't even say Africans in that act. That's very important detail right there, because if it was millions of Africans, they would have specified Africans. That's important to note. The act of prohibition of importation of slaves from 1807, right, when they stopped importing slaves, they didn't even specify African. It said any Negro, mulatto, or person of color. Now that we understand these are tags, that could include literally just Indians or Black Europeans. Are we to believe that slaves of American Indian ancestry could still be legally imported from Spanish Florida or Texas, perhaps? In any case, American Indian persons must have covered by the act. Of course. There are also many descriptions of mulattoes found in court cases and runaway slave advertisements which attest to Indian-looking persons being regarded as mulattoes or to Indian features being within the range of characteristics ascribed to mulattoes. A few examples should suffice. First, a man named Robbins was denied the right to vote in North Carolina. In the 1856 court case, it was noted that his father was a dark-colored man with straight hair. And that his grandfather was a dark red-faced mulatto, wow, with dark straight hair. These are all colored folks, right? All black folks. That's how you come in different shades. You look different. You know, your grandfather look like this, your grandmother look like this, your other grandpa looks like this, your cousin looks like this, your mom looks like this, your dad looks like this, you know. So dark red-faced mulatto, dark colored. All these people will be called African Americans today. It don't matter, right? They'll be called black. In a Kentucky case in 1848, it was alleged that a girl's mother was Jen, a mulatto woman and a slave. Others said Jen was a free Indian woman. The girl Rose Landerdale was very so-called white-looking or light-skinned, right, and has more or less Indian blood in her. There was strong evidence that she was a bound or indented Indian girl. She wasn't a slave. See, she was an indentured servant. You see, that's the real slavery. To be free at the age of 18 or 21. That's why they were freeing their slaves at some point, not because they wanted to get rid of their slaves and they felt a change of heart, and a lot of times family, but a lot of times it's just their indenture or apprenticeship is over. In the case of Gobu and versus Gobu, North Carolina, a person secured his freedom because of possible Indian ancestry. As an infant, he had been found in a barn. He was later described as being of an olive color. All right, again, between black and yellow. Come on, olive, Spanish olives, guys, they're very, very like dark. or yellowish, greenish, very dark, like a brownish. A lot of them are brownish red. All right, if you look it all up, look up Spanish, you see all the different shades and colors. But they're saying specifically between black and yellow. Had long hair and prominent nose. All right, such persons may have descended from Indians in both lines, or at least in the maternal. They may have descended from a white person in the maternal line or from a mulatto parents originally free. 1768, in New Jersey, and an advertisement was placed for a mulatto man named Samuel Wright, born near Hampton, Virginia. He had bushy hair and was rather red. He was rather red, man. Remember the red man, the Indian, the red copper colored? Finally, in 1890, Bret Hart summed up things well when he said that Boone's Culpepper's wife was variously believed to be a gypsy, a Mexican, a bright mulatto, a digger, right? You see what they're saying? Indian. Wow, a digger. So many other examples could be cited of a similar nature, okay? Many other examples. So what are the implications of the meaning of mulatto, all right? We're almost to the dismount. We're almost done. We got like 2 more pages, guys. All right? Thank you for sticking around, all right? In 1793, a prominent Cherokee leader, Little Turkey, declared that the Spaniards were not real white people. They weren't the real white. They were black at first. Remember, we know that, but that's probably the deepness behind it. But remember, people will be classified as white. So he said they're not really white people. And what few I have seen of them look like mulattoes. You see, the Spaniards look like what? Mulattoes? They look like colored folks, and I would never have anything to say to them. This statement, designed to please Anglo-Saxon ears, is perplexing only if we conceive of the term mulatto as referring to a narrow mixture of black, African, or European Caucasian, right? That's narrow. That's modern way of, we've been debunking that, right? The last couple videos. So the Spaniards of Florida and Louisiana were, of course, largely mixed with Arawak, Carib, and North American native ancestry. Listen, the Spaniards of Florida, what? They had mixed with who? With the Arawak, with the Caribs, with the American Indians of that area as well. And they're saying black because they were black, right? And possibly North African. I can see that. A lot of them could be possibly Berbers, Algerians, Moors. What conclusion can we arrive at after reviewing the various types of evidence discussed? First, we have found that no term was available to the English to refer to people of mixed race or intermediate mongrel appearance from the 16th century until the 18th century, except for mulatto. The term half-breed seems to appear by 1751 in South Carolina, but is used primarily for European American hybrids living in native-controlled areas. The term people of color appears by 1777 in North Carolina and by 1800 in South Carolina. It is, however, primarily popularized by federal use in the census of 1800 and adopted gradually in the statutes of most states in the next 2 or 3 decades. So after the 1800s is when they started really applying the hijack, the reclassification and all that. So musty is used by 1712 in South Carolina, but its use tends to be restricted to a few colonies only on the mainland, although it was also adopted in Jamaica and Trinidad. As noted, dictionaries do not cite mestizo until 1757. In the formative period of interracial contact, from the 1590s through the 1700s to 1750, the term mulatto must generally refer to any type of mixed blood. Any type of mixed blood, don't matter if they're both people of color, as is corroborated by the Virginia legislation of 1705. Still further, mulatto remains the only term commonly used for mixed bloods in Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, and all of the New England colonies. Not enough evidence is available for Pennsylvania, while in New Jersey, mulatto is always a primary term used, musty being rare. Although many early dictionaries specify that mulatto refers to a half, what they're calling a negro person, and whatever else white, right? Enough evidence has been assembled to show that the word was also used for mixed bloods or even American Indians. Literally just American Indians with no African ancestry, no, not in mixture, who had no African ancestry, okay? No African ancestry. In general, the term seems to be best translated as mixed. although at times a brown-colored person might be a more apt rendering. A brown-colored person, okay? Sometimes they just call it a brown-colored person a mulatto without knowing their ancestry. They literally admitting all this, guys. Are you paying attention? So we can be certain, I believe, that most American, right, and whatever mixture they are with other American Indians from other parts of America or Black Europeans were called mulattoes until being called colored or even Negro at a later date. Yeah, they keep reclassifying you to your African American, right? We can also, I think, be certain that European American and European American hybrids were also called mulattoes, except and as above also where the term musty was in common use. It would seem that those many students of North American history and society who have been fascinated solely with the black-white nexus or who have conceived the Black and Native American history as being two largely separate streams are going to have to re-examine their assumptions. Exactly. That's what I've been trying to be careful with the whole time reading this when they're trying to separate black, half Native, because it could be the same people. They're not two separate streams. That's what he's saying. You gotta have to re-examine that. Your assumption that it's two different peoples. This will have great implications for the study of diffusion of central traits in areas as diverse as folk tales. All right, body bag. That's exactly where these folk tales really come from who. Yes, a lot of them are indigenous and a lot of them are from black folks, so-called black folks, because it's the same people. Like the music again, music as well, right? Jazz, blues, all that, social structure, hip hop, right? The drums, folk language, dancing, right? Dancing, folk language, and religion. Especially important will be the construction of the basic plantation and free non-white cultures, both in North America and around the Caribbean, into which all later slaves and free people became subsequently immersed. We must also re-examine the myth of the lusty white man who produced an entire race of mulattoes. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's hijack city right there. Bunch of white men raping African women. That's what a lot of you guys think. That's what they made people think, right? The image so exuberantly portrayed by several writers. It must be kept in mind that the early documented cases of white parentage run into the dozens or hundreds at the most, right? So-called white, though. That could be a black European in any given colony, or even an Indian they're calling away. In any given colony, while the numbers of Indians forcibly merged into the slave population in South Carolina alone seems to exceed the total of white parentage cases for all the colonies. Yeah, exactly. He's saying even if there's some reported so-called white parents, there's more mixture between other Negroes, with the Indians and other people being called Negroes in the colonies than so-called white. Admittedly, there's a great deal of hearsay, sometimes inflammatory evidence relating to the sexually active white planter and overseer, but hearsay evidence must in the end give way before concrete empirical data. Exactly. Show me the genealogy. The free colored population before the Revolutionary War developed largely by the natural growth of people descended from parents and especially mothers who were born free and not from manumissions. These free mothers were ordinarily, therefore, of European or American Indian or mixed, right? Like I've been trying to tell you guys, you're American Indians and Black Europeans. It would seem clear that the entire conception of the origin of non-African ancestry within the United States, right? So-called black population requires rigorous re-examination. Come on, the non-African origin, and you need to examine that. The non-African origin of the so-called Black Americans. You need to really examine that. How big is the non-African in them? It's huge. That's what I'm trying to tell you all these years. Okay? It requires rigorous re-examination. Everybody listen right now. You who are in that field, you study this, you work with colleges, you work at institutions where you need to re-examine that. If you're the historian, I'm telling you right now, you can't just ignore this. It says in 1712, John Norris provided an advice to prospective planters. He told them to buy 15 Negro men and 18 Indian women. Oh, this is a good one. Pay attention. Or if they were starting out small, a good Negro man and a good Indian woman. If you're starting out small, why? What is he saying? The implications of such evidence must now at last be taken to heart. So he's saying if you ever want to start a plantation or farm, and you want to get your business going and everything, you need the Negroes and the Indians, right? All Indians, right? Or Indian woman. Finally, a new look needs to be taken at many surviving American Indian communities, primarily along the East Coast, who have been denied recognition because of being classified in the past as mulattoes or people of color. You see, unfairly, a lot of these people got reclassified, paper genocide, and now they're fighting to get their recognition back. And they need to really give these people their identity back. The truth is in the sources that we've been reading. It's historically, they know what they did. All right, these people are being affected. The Eastern Woodland people of the Eastern Coast of the United States. Needless to state, the presence of whatever Negro ancestry he's saying should be no bar to state and federal recognition as Indians. But in addition, the use of the terms analyzed herein provides no evidence in and of itself of specific African descent. There's no evidence. Body bag. The use of the terms analyzed herein provide no evidence in and of itself of specific African descent. This is what we're gonna highlight before we go here. Okay? Body bag for the illusion, man. Shout out to Drop, man. Shout out to you for sticking around. That racial mixture has occurred is obvious, but its significance for ethnic and cultural self-definition is a quite separate matter. Exactly. Let them know, Jack Forbes. Shout out to Jack Forbes, yo. Yeah. And we reached the end of the book, guys. Of this chapter. Not the book, but this chapter. Again, this was the book Africans and Native Americans. The language of race and the evolution of red-black peoples, right? The so-called mulattoes here in the cover. Look at these so-called mulattoes by Jack D. Forbes. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope this was a lot of drop. A lot of reading I had to do. This was a longer video. I wanted to do the whole chapter in one video. You can reference it back. You can come back to this video, you know, if you need to source it, right? Here it is. Check this out, right? There's a lot of information, but I hope the point is clear. The last two videos I did, the origin, before it got to the Americas, the whole Arab origin had to do with Blackamoors and Blackamoor. And you see, none of the definitions ever was talking about anybody being white or African and mixing. Mulatto, as you saw here, guys, literally was applied also just to American Indians in general. A lot of the times as they're being reclassified. So there's something we got to really look into when we look at these things in our genealogy. Nobody can try to say you're not an Indian if they can't prove the African part. You get what I'm saying? The burden of proof is on them, guys. Not on you. We got the proof. We got the receipts. We got the research. It's all up. Change is coming. All right. This was a deep chapter. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you very much for sticking around all the way to the end. If you did, I hope you enjoyed it really, guys, you know, because, you know, reading this sometimes is not easy, you know, a whole chapter like this, you know, but I did it, you know, and I enjoyed it as well. And I got a lot of drop, and it's a good thing that we read the whole chapter completely so we can analyze it ourselves for review for educational purposes, commentary, you know, critiquing, discussion, fair use. All right. As you guys can see, the hijack is that you've been paper genocided. That's the truth right there. And they applied tags on you, and they still do. And now you want to create more tags. You want to be ABC, FBA, 1, 2, 3. I don't know, FBA. I don't know what y'all want to call yourselves. Stop calling yourselves letters and all these other tags and stuff. Stop grouping yourselves with everybody else, all kinfolk and kinfolks. All right. And if they are kinfolk, then you'll know. You'll know right away. You'll know in your genealogy, right? It's just not about looks. Anyways, we out of here. I appreciate you guys again. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you like the video so it can get a lot of views and a lot of good sharing on YouTube. Make sure to share it yourself as well. Share it everywhere so people can learn the stuff, guys. And, you know, subscribe if you're not subscribed. Help me out. If you like to donate, I got my Patreon page. You can become a Patreon. I got the link in the description, or join my channel membership, or give a super chat comment. You can leave a super chat donation on the comments as well, if you enjoyed it and you want to support what I do. Only if you're willing and able to, okay? I'm still gonna do what I'm gonna do anyways. No pressure, no obligation. All right. You saw it. That breakdown of mulatto. Nobody should ever be doubting what mulatto is and stuff. You could have a reference now. You got these last 2 videos as reference. So thank you once again for tuning in. Appreciate you guys. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Oh, wow.